Well, good evening and welcome to the Salem City Council, Salem Housing Authority, and the Salem Urban Renewal Agency meetings for March 28th. We'll begin with the Salem City Council. I'll call that to order, and if the recorder would please call a roll.
Councilor Stapleton.
Here.
Councilor Anderson.
Present.
Councilor Phillips.
Here.
Councilor Leung. Absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilor Hoy.
Here.
Councilor Nordyke.
Here.
Councilor Varney.
Here.
Mayor Bennett.
Here. Okay. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and now we have the pleasure of having Micki Varney sworn in, had the oath of office given to her to be the new Ward 8 City Councilor. Public will remember that we appointed Micki last week. Want to get her on board as soon as we can, so we prevailed upon her, and here she is. Dan, are you going to be swearing Micki in?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Dan Atchison, City Attorney. Councilor Varney, if you could please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Micki Varney.
I, Micki Varney.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support the Constitution.
That I will support the Constitution.
And laws of the United States of America.
And laws of the United States of America.
And of the State of Oregon.
And of the State of Oregon.
And the City Charter.
And the City Charter.
And ordinances of the City of Salem.
And ordinances of the City of Salem.
And that I will, to the best of my ability.
And that I will, to the best of my ability.
Faithfully and lawfully.
Faithfully and lawfully.
Perform the duties of City Councilor for Salem.
Perform the duties of City Councilor for Salem.
During my continuance therein.
During my continuance therein.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yay. Congratulations. Micki, anything you'd like to say?
Well, it's just such an honor to be here and to represent my neighbors in Ward 8. I wanted to say, wow, it's been a great onboarding experience, and I look forward to working with everybody.
Great. We all look forward to working with you, and welcome aboard. We're very, very happy to have you here.
Thank you. Gives
us a full complement of city councilors now. Okay. Any additions or deletions, Councilor Hoy?
Yes.
Okay.
I move approval of additions and deletions to the agenda.
I'll second.
Second by Trevor Phillips.
On item 5A, we have the addition of applicant's final written argument that was received March 28, 2022.
Okay. Okay, any discussion?
No.
Recorder, please call a roll.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Oh, thank you. Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung is absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay. Very good. We're going to then have manager and council comments. I'd like to start with the city manager, Kristen Rutherford.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the time because I want to speak for a moment about the event that happened yesterday. Yesterday, 4 members of our community died tragically when a driver crashed his automobile into an encampment on Front Street. Joanne Beck, Luke KG, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing these names correctly, Joe Posada III and Rochelle Zamocona lost their lives. Derek Hart and Savannah Miller survived the accident, but they are still hospitalized. The driver in this situation is facing multiple charges, including 4 counts of first-degree manslaughter, among other charges. Our police chief is also available this evening to answer any questions. On behalf of our city staff, I want to offer our condolences to the family and friends of those who died. I want to offer wishes of speedy recovery to those survivors who were injured and hospitalized. And I want to offer compassion to the community. I also want to offer my appreciation to all of the city staff, our community, volunteers, case managers, mental health professionals, and partners in other agencies and other service providers who provided assistance over the last 24 hours to those community members impacted by this accident and who show up every day, boots on the ground, to work on very complex and difficult situations. Volunteers, ARCHES staff, city staff, and other community partners have provided an immediate and ongoing response to this tragedy. Grief counselors have been available, replacement possessions have been provided to those in need, and outreach teams have been checking in on people. I personally feel very grateful that in Salem, we have so many dedicated professionals and volunteers working to help unsheltered individuals in our community during a national housing and sheltering epidemic that has been decades in the making and which is larger than any one community can resolve on its own. Again, my condolences and my appreciation for all of those that have been there to offer assistance.
Thank you, Ms. Rethford. Councilor Nordyke, would you like to take over from here?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, I'm going to try and get through this. So 2 a.m. yesterday morning, 4 innocent lives were lost. Joan Beck was 24 years old. Luke Hagee was 21 years old. Joe Posada was 54. And Rochelle Zamacona was 29. The individuals injured, Derek Hart was 43 years old, and Savannah Miller was age 18. They all deserve safety and human dignity. So please join me in a moment of silence for our victims and the survivors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nordyke. Chief Womack, I'll give you an opportunity to kind of fill us in, bring us up to speed. Where are we on this situation and anything you'd like to report on this?
Yes, excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. 2 a.m. yesterday morning, our community experienced just a tragic and frankly horrific accident here not far from our facility, where a vehicle left the roadway and crashed into an unmanaged encampment, taking the lives of 4 people, injuring some others. It's been difficult for us to deal with too, but our officers and our traffic team worked hard nonstop to investigate this crash, coordinate with our service providers, and ultimately make an arrest yesterday. It was extremely important for our community and our staff that we bring justice to the victims and their families. And that arrest yesterday was a key step in that process. We're going to continue working with the Marion County DA's office now as they move forward with the prosecution. Immediately after the crash at the scene, officers began helping others in the area to relocate, to connect to services. We began communicating with our local service providers and partners, and we're going to continue to do so now. We're doing that ongoing work to try to support those who remain there to the best of our abilities. But the criminal case is now in the hands of the district attorney, so we at the police department won't be releasing any more specifics on the case, and that's in the interest of protecting the integrity of that investigation and in support of a successful prosecution. And so we'll be supporting the DA's office as best we can with that. It was already mentioned, the charges and the arrest that was made. And so the case, we've We've done that initial investigation. It's complete. And now we're looking forward to a successful prosecution.
Thank you, Chief. I want to compliment you and your officers. We received a number of emails from folks who were very soon either on the scene or assisting in recovery that commented numerous times on the sensitivity and helpfulness of your officers who were there. So please thank them very much for the work they do for this community. We really count on them having this kind of interface with every member of our community. Anyone else? Councilor Anderson, sorry, I see your thing now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chief. I just, since this is an ongoing prosecution, we can't comment on the facts of the case, but I just want to read what I put in my Facebook page today because it relates to, well, you'll hear what it is. There's absolutely no excuse for the horrific incident on Salem's Front Street where a person drove a car into a homeless camp. He is to blame, not the campers. It was not a car who killed and injured them. It was a person driving a car. No matter how these folks ended up on Front Street, they are human beings who deserve our compassion and help. And I want to segue into that. That was my statement, but I also want to say, Chief Womack, to you and your officers, I have heard nothing but wonderful things, both from people who were there at the scene, you know, conveyed to others through me, and people who have been at the aftermath. Every single person who I have spoken to and every person they spoke to said wonderful things about the helpfulness and the kindness of the Salem Police Department in dealing with this, you know, immense, unspeakable tragedy. And, you know, we ought to remember that it wasn't a car that killed him, it was a person that killed him. And we too often move the person out of and just say a car hit him. Well, somebody was driving the car. So thank you again, Chief, and thanks all the city staff for their compassion in dealing with this issue.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really don't have many words that would be adequate to sort of reflect on my feelings at this point, but I will just say that, you know, everybody involved in this case, whether it's the victims at the scene or the responders or the volunteers or other campers living nearby, everybody is impacted by this. And so I would just encourage everybody to be kind to one another. The secondary trauma is real, and compassion is called for. And this just reminds me that we need to redouble our efforts to get people into appropriate housing. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else? Councilor Phillips?
Thank you, Mayor Bennett, and thank you, Interim City Manager Kristen Rutherford and Chief of Police Trevor Womack for your timely updates and compassionate words tonight. Some of the worst cases I've ever seen as an emergency room doctor involved components that have been reported on, in the events that happened, the tragic events that happened this past weekend. For the first responders and city staff and anyone else, friends or family who are directly involved, it's okay to ask for help. It is a sign of strength to know that you need that, and it's okay. I was pleased to see that there are multiple agencies offering grief counseling. It's rough to see, horrific and tragic events like this transpire, but don't, go through this alone. There are many people and professionals available throughout this community that are ready and willing to help. I was not working this past weekend. I just wanted to take a brief moment to express my appreciation for the colleagues that I work with in the emergency room, be they technicians, nursing staff, RT, or my fellow physician colleagues. These mass casualty type events, they're not easy, but I couldn't imagine a better place for people to go than Salem Hospital. Beyond that, my thoughts are still with the people in Ukraine. The last time we spoke, it was a few 100,000 people that had been displaced, and now it's over 10 million. I still hope for and pray for a swift diplomatic resolution, a ceasefire, and then a withdrawal from that country. I really wanted to try and focus on some positives. And last week, my family got to take an opportunity for some local events that were really pretty wonderful. So, man, the last couple 24 hours have been rough, but spring break recap. I'd like to recognize and show our family's appreciation to the 7 local Salem organizations who joined together and created the Spring Break Passport to Fun last week. The City of Salem Library, Deepwood Museum, Hallie Ford Museum of Art, the World Beat Gallery, Willamette Heritage Center, the Oregon State Capitol, and the State Capitol State Park. These wonderful groups teamed up to offer families fun and free or discounted ways to explore Salem and learn more about our community during spring break. My family participated, and the kids learned a lot and had a ton of fun. This is just another reason why we love calling Salem home. And I wanted to say thank you to the amazing community members who made it possible.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else? Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you. Yeah, there's really a tough day for us here today, and I really appreciate everybody's really well thought out words that try and reach the depth of the grief that is in our community right now. And I wanted to actually kind of step outside of the norm here a little bit. This afternoon, we got an email from DJ Vincent, and he spoke to a lot of pain that's in our community today. And included in that, he had written a prayer, and I've adjusted it a little bit to be as inclusive as I can, but I thought that this was fitting for today. He says, we ask that the divine may grant us peace, that in our pain, we may find comfort, that in our confusion, we may find a measure of understanding, that in our anger, we may find forgiveness, that in our sorrow, we find hope, that in the aftermath of fear, that we may find strength and healing. Divine Spirit, comfort us and move in our world. Bring peace to those who have lost their very humanity. Bring peace to those who have lost their sense of belonging. Bring peace to those who have lost their friends and family. Bring peace even to those who do violence knowingly and unknowingly. Divine Spirit, change us, transform the margins. Turn barren, desolate deserts into an oasis of hope. Turn impassable vast seas into waters of life. Divine Spirit, sit with us in our grief. Hold the forgotten ones and help us to remember. And I thought that was beautifully written and perfect for our community at this time of really deep grief. I also wanted to include some hopeful things, like Councilor Phillips, and state that I had the chance to go to an event yesterday with Rainbow Youth, which is a fantastic group here in Salem that is getting restarted after the pandemic and is hosted their first public event this weekend, Pizza at the Park. And it was a wonderful time to go and be with really compassionate, caring individuals who are trying to do a lot of good in our community. I also got to tour the new YMCA, which is coming along beautifully. And I, for one, cannot wait until that opens and that community space again becomes available to us. And lastly, I wanted to thank the neighbors over at NESCA and Chris Hoy. We all got together this weekend and picked up litter along Hawthorne. And I'm sore, Chris. I know you warned me that I would be. It was my first time with the group, and it was a lovely experience. So thank you for folks in our community who are going out and doing the good work that we all see the need for, and that community involvement really counts and it matters. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Hoy?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, in this difficult situation, I just forgot to offer words of welcome to Councilor Varney. I'm really, really glad that you're here with us and really excited to be working with you. So thank you for applying thank you for your volunteerism and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Councilor Hoy. Councilor Nordijk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now that I've had an opportunity to compose myself, I want to offer a few more comments. Amidst all of the grief and trauma over this incident, I also want to remind folks that this is Child Abuse Awareness and Prevention Month. So we'll be hearing a proclamation on that soon. There is an opportunity for folks to show their support for child abuse prevention this Friday, and I suspect we'll be hearing a little bit more about that. But there's going to be a car parade leaving the Oregon State Fairgrounds at 8:15 a.m. to go to the Capitol. And if you want, you can bring your car down. There apparently will be supplies on hand to decorate. And I, for one, am really looking forward to it. In my day job at the Oregon Department of Justice, I've handled hundreds of cases involving child abuse, whether it was physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect. The amount of trauma that happens behind closed doors can't be fully quantified. And there are so many incidents that go on unreported out of fear of retaliation. So this is something that really hits me to my core. And I appreciate our first responders every day, without whom there would be no justice and there'd be no accountability for everything that happens to children behind closed doors. So if you're able to join us, please do. I'll be there in my electric car and encourage other folks to do the same. So there's that. Yeah, I'm still reeling from what happened this weekend, clearly. Another shout out I want to give, in addition to the remarks that my colleagues have made, I want to thank our police for contacting the survivors and connecting them with motels and other services. Thank you. That's the kind of compassion we need. I know I reached out to the Marion County commissioners and they informed me that the Marion County Psychiatric Crisis Center is sending 2 mental health professionals to join in the efforts to support and engage. So I thank Marion County for that as well. And I know that the city staff have been a part of the outreach effort, as well as Arches has also offered grief counseling. Be Bold Ministries has been involved. Church of the Park has been involved. And so against a backdrop of negativity and toxicity that is often aimed at our unsheltered population, we have people who believe in supporting everyone, in giving everyone a measure of dignity, in doing their part to provide safety and security. So I see tragedies like this as a reminder to all of us that we must continue to prioritize safety, shelter, and affordable housing to everyone. We've made a lot of strides in that area, but this tragedy just goes to show that until we have a roof over every head, anyone who lives outdoors is at risk of harm. So I appreciate my colleagues, and I know we have some agenda items on our calendar tonight to help us address things like funding the Navigation Center. These are the things that we can do to move more people indoors. The less people off the streets, the more people who can find safety, who can stabilize, who can find the services and the job opportunities they need to rebuild their own lives, to be connected with the mental health services that they have long needed, but have never received due to a longstanding underfunding of mental health services from the federal government and on down over decades. So I hope that this tragedy will be a reminder to all of us to keep pushing forward. And I hope that this will also be a time to persuade others to be a part of the solution and to lean in with a desire to help others rather than judge others. And last but not least, I sincerely hope that I appreciate the fact that arrest has been made, and I have faith in our prosecution and in our process, and I hope justice is served. Thank you.
Ms. Rutherford.
Thank you, Mayor. I did have another item that I wanted to mention related to this subject tangentially, and that is, this tragedy certainly illustrates how great the need is. And council has taken numerous actions over the last few years to try to meet that need. And one of those actions was taken earlier this year in identifying sites for micro shelters and providing funding to activate one of those sites. Unfortunately, as we have found over the last few years, this is often a one step forward, step back kind of process. And we have here in the last week or two encountered a step back situation. We were served with a writ of review that I will let our city attorney speak to, that is for the moment, until this is addressed through the legal process, putting a stop to activating the site on Center Street. So I will hand this off to City Attorney Dan Atchison to speak about the writ in a bit more detail.
Thank you, Dan Atchison, City Attorney. So on March 15th, property owner adjacent to the Center Street site filed a writ of review in Marion County Circuit Court. The court issued an order prohibiting us from making future plans and preparations for siting the micro shelter at the Center Street site. At this point, we are compiling the record of the decision to provide to the court, and we are preparing to file responsive motions to get the matter dismissed. Essentially, the standard is whether or not we have adequate findings and evidence in the record to determine whether by citing the shelter there, approving the site for the shelter, whether we placed the public at unreasonable risk. There's a state law that applies to this. There's also the city's own emergency declaration for the unsheltered that applies to this as well. And we hope to have the matter disposed of quickly.
Excellent. Hey, anyone else? Councilor Phillips?
Yeah, thank you for the update on the Center Street. Is there any word on a possible like extension to the site that was going to go offline in May?
Yes, Councilor. As soon as we received this writ, we immediately reached out to DEQ. It's the Department of Environmental Quality that has placed the time limit on the former DMV site. And they did grant us a 90-day extension so that we can continue to offer sheltering in that location through the end of August.
Thank you.
Okay. Very good. We'll move on then. We have 3 proclamations tonight, and I'll take you through them here. Whereas the city of Salem is one of only 17 cities in the country to have been a charter participant in the Tree City USA program since 1976, and the first city in Oregon to receive a Tree City USA 46th year award from the Arbor Day Foundation. And whereas for the 46th consecutive year, the city of Salem has met the requirements for Tree City USA due to its urban forestry program, supported by a minimum dollar per capita of public funds, tree ordinance, and formal Arbor Month activities. And whereas the city of Salem is also a sterling city with 16 Tree City USA Growth Awards in recognition of the city exceeding the goals established by the Arbor Day Foundation. Now, therefore, I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim April 2022 as Salem's Arbor Month and encourage all people of Salem to participate in community, school, and private observances of Arbor Month. And here to accept the proclamation is Don Gunther. He's arborist for the City of Salem Public Works Department. He's worked with the city for over 20 years. He has a wealth of knowledge. When it comes to anything with trees, he's a tree climber, a tree trimmer, and he heads up the city's GIS tree inventory. The Urban Forestry Division has inventoried almost 30,000 street trees, and Don has had a hand in doing most of the data collection. Don serves on the board of Oregon Community Trees and is an ISA certified arborist with a tree risk assessment qualification. Don truly embodies the city's at your service motto. And if he had a personal motto, it would be saving the city one tree at a time. Don, yeah. Good evening, Don. Did you have anything you wanted to say about Arbor Month?
Good evening. I will say I've received a proclamation virtually. I would just say that it's an honor to receive the proclamation. I know it's not to me personally, this is given to the city, but I receive it on behalf of Parks and on behalf of the Urban Forestry section. It is an honor to be a part of allowing the city to be such a long time Tree City USA.
Great. Well, thank you, Don, for all your work. And keep going, one tree at a time.
One tree at a time.
Yeah, we've got a ways to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're working at it.
You bet. Thank you. Okay. Whereas the monarch butterfly is one of the most iconic and studied butterflies in North America, widely admired for its beauty, and whereas the monarch butterfly is extremely beneficial, pollinating many cultivated flowers and crops, and serving as an indicator species for the ecological health of large geographical areas, and whereas the monarch butterfly's annual migration, which has been described as one of the most spectacular in the insect world, is now classified as a threatened phenomenon by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And whereas the Western population of monarchs, which overwinter in California, has declined by more than 99% since the 1980s, from an estimated 4.5 million monarchs to less than 30,000 counted at overwintering sites in 2019. And whereas a major reason for the decline is the widespread loss of the milkweed plant, the only plant monarch butterflies lay their eggs on, as well as it being the monarch's primary larval food source. And whereas the entire community can play a critical role in providing habitat for monarchs and other pollinators by planting milkweed and nectar plants and reducing pesticide use. Therefore, I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim on March 28th that I will continue to participate in the Mayor's Monarch Pledge, and through the signing of the National Wildlife Federation's Mayor's Monarch Pledge, commit the City of Salem to voluntarily help restore habitat for the monarch and encourage all people of Salem to do the same. And I'd like to present that proclamation to the Ammon family. Jenny, Casey, and Henry, pollinator habitat volunteers and local residents. Casey and Henry Ammon work with Matt Johnson in the City of Salem Parks operations to establish the pollinator garden at Eola Ridge Park. They watered the plants throughout the first summer to make sure the plants survived. They also work with the city's YEEP educator, Brandy Nelson, to record educational videos about the importance of pollinators and native plants. The Ammon family got involved with the Eola Ridge Pollinator Habitat Project because they had the opportunity to help build habitat close to home. Jenny states, "The pollinator plot is a wonderful reminder for our family that we all have the ability to do something to improve our place." So Ammon family, are you here? There you are. Is there anything, we're having you receive this, and then I wonder if you had anything you'd like to say.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. We love our parks. We are very appreciative for all of the parks that we have, and it was nice to be able to do something to give back.
Well, it's great. This is just the kind of project in the parks we really like to see happen, that kind of spread beyond just a tennis court and some swings. This really takes us to a new height of activity. So thank you so much for your work on behalf of the community and the monarch butterflies of the world. Thank you. And finally, As Councilor Nordyke mentioned, every child deserves to live in a safe, loving, and caring family environment. And whereas in 2020, there were 11,642 reported victims of child abuse and neglect in Oregon. And of those reported cases, 1,171 were victims in Marion County. Whereas we stand together as individuals, organizations, and government agencies to commit to preventing child abuse in our county by raising awareness throughout the community and by educating and supporting caregivers. And whereas we assert that strong families and safe, stable, and nurturing environments free from violence and neglect are essential for children's optimal growth and success, which ensures a secure future for our communities where the needs of children are a priority and the needs of families are met. Now, therefore, I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim April 2022 as Child Abuse Prevention Month and ask the community to observe this month with programs and activities that commit to protecting our children. And we are honored this evening to have Allison Kelly, CEO of Liberty House, here to receive the proclamation along with Kyle Tarr, Prevention Program Director at Liberty House. So good evening, Allison.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Bennett, and good evening to all the members of the Salem City Council. It's an honor to be here tonight. I do believe Kyle was going to try to be present, but he's also preparing to speak at the Woodburn City Council, so he may not be with us. I would like to just thank all of you for your support. I think tonight, above all nights, is a night where we can connect the different types of trauma that we see. Childhood abuse can cause such extensive trauma that it can drive people to substance abuse, to addiction, all of the things that make it very difficult for people to hold on to jobs. And when they are not able to hold on to jobs, it's very difficult for them to remain in their homes. And it's very much connected to the homelessness that we see on the street. So I want to thank Councilor Nordyke for her amazing comments and her work throughout her career. Councilor Stapleton has taken a strong interest in this. All of our city council's members have. At Liberty House is the Child Advocacy Center, or basically your resource for child abuse. We have a team of specially trained pediatricians and other medical providers. We have a team of specially trained trauma-focused counselors and therapists. The number of children that we have seen in our clinic has doubled as a matter of the pandemic. So we saw about 522 children in our clinic in 2019 and saw 922 in 2021. The pandemic has been really rough on children. And we've seen an additional 400 children in therapy this last year. So we're reaching nearly 1,300, 1,400 children, and then another several hundred each year through our prevention education programs. And many experts agree that we can't arrest our way out of this. And I do really want to highlight Chief Womack and his team at Salem Police Department. We are able to work with the police on a regular basis, on a daily basis, to help coordinate services so that children have the best response possible. And yet the problem is so extensive, we can't prosecute our way out of it, but we can encourage people to become more aware, more educated, and prevent. So there are trainings on our irespectandprotect.com website. We encourage you. We've doubled up on all of our trainings in the month of April. As Councilor Nordyke said, there will be a community statement in the form of that car parade that leaves from the Oregon State Fairgrounds on Friday morning. And to register for that car parade, go to parentforthefuture.org. So these are both great websites, irespectandprotect.com and parentforthefuture.org. And we are just very grateful for everybody pitching in. I think we want to be able to say that child abuse is 100% preventable. Researchers will tell us it is largely preventable, and every single one of us can make a difference and do our part. So thank you very much, Mayor Bennett and members of the City Council. And at Liberty House, we are very honored to be the best resource we can for all of you and for all of the children in our community.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Allison, for all the work you and your organization do. This, I mean, it's, you know, we can't overstate how important Liberty House is in this community. So thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to then go on to public comment. We have 4 folks who would like to address the council this evening. Remind everybody you get 3 minutes. At 3 minutes, I will cut you off. So speak right on through. Lynn Takata, you're going to go first.
Okay, thank you. I am going to try to share my screen. I thought I had it already, but I guess I'm not able to share it. Mayor Bennett, can you please give me a chance to try to figure out how to share the screen?
Yeah, we'll come back to you, Lynn. Okay?
I really appreciate it.
Gotcha. No problem. Okay, let's go to Joan Lloyd. There she is.
Good evening. I just want to thank everybody for lending your ears to my testimony. And I would like to propose that the D Street Park be in Nen. And this is because Nen has lost so much recreational space over the years. And we were told by the city that they did not own any property, vacant property that could be used for parks. So a few years ago, we went to the school district and asked if we could have a space at Barrack Field to maybe put a play structure in. And they said, yes, they were, doing a new plan for it. And then they came back and said, well, we could do it for $50,000. Well, Nen doesn't have that kind of money and doesn't know how to raise it. So we tried the CEO at Fairgrounds to see if we could have a section of the parking lot near the houses that are to the south side of it. And that didn't work out. So now there is vacant space. The city owns vacant space. We think it should be in Nen because Nen is has higher density and fewer acres of parklands than does NESCA. We also were told that it would be very hard for the city to administrate the park if it were in 2 neighborhoods. So I believe that the eastern boundary of Nen should be at 25th Street, from Market down to Center Street. I'm supposed to have a map here, but I don't know that Leslie has it ready for me. It looks like on the eastern boundary, Nen has had bites taken out of it, and this would be more or less a straight line. There are a couple little jags. And okay, Leslie is doing, okay. So the red line shows where the new boundary would be, and that would mean that the D Street Park would be in Nen. So that is my testimony, the reasons for wanting it in Nen, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joan. Congratulations on being appointed to the Parks Board, by the way.
Well, thank you. It's an honor.
You're welcome. Any questions for Joan? Okay. Lynn, are you ready to go?
I'm gonna try. I have a new device, so it's a little bit of a challenge, but let me try again.
Okay.
and see if I can manage to do this. Maybe it will work. It worked.
Great.
So thank you, Mayor Bennett and City Councilors, for the opportunity to testify. This is a picture of the D Street Park, and people have said, why does it matter, you know, if it's in one neighborhood association or another? And we believe that participation in planning community parks is going to make them stronger. People will have more ownership and stewardship. And living in Northeast Salem, we've all experienced a lot of recent gunshots, violence. There've been in the last 3 years, 2 people murdered, a block from my house. So parks reduce crime, and there's various statistics that show that. I'm going to try to figure out how to make this work. So our community has cared a lot about parks. Is this slide showing the new slide?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so 5 years ago, we started working in Englewood Park. We just are very committed to our parks. It was covered with ivy. We have been doing 9 to 10 events every single year. We've engaged hundreds of people in the community, and now we've got flowering plants. We work with families to do education. So sometimes bad things happen. I'm not going to stay on this slide very long. This week we had major graffiti, and what did we do? I worked for about 5 hours to engage neighbors to make sure they understood that they needed to take that off their fences as soon as possible. The city was helpful, sent out a crew that next morning. We kind of just are bringing people together in the Inglewood Forest Festival. When we had a shooting in the park, we advocated for lights. Another Forest Festival picture. So I wanted to address some concerns that our neighborhood association had about the staff report. And I don't know where I'm at with time because I'm not seeing it on
37
this.
seconds, 36, 35.
Oh my gosh, thanks, Joe.
I know.
So there are a number of errors in the staff report that were not corrected. One is that none didn't advocate for the park at all. And we did starting in 2013. NEN has, according to the city goals, the goal should be 68,000 acres. We have 9 in parkland, while our neighbor NESCA has more acres per capita than.
Time's up, Lynn. I really
Thank you.
sorry.
No, it's good, Chuck. Thank you. I can't see the clock, so.
Okay. Any questions for Lynn? Yes, Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Ms. Takata, for your testimony and the images. It's always helpful. Can you speak a little bit more to me about what your vision would be for a park?
So that's the critical thing. We don't have a vision. We just feel that both communities, community doesn't stop on a line, right? We have people in NEN and NESCA that have the same opinion. So we have one of the densest communities in the city, and we want the residents in our community and the residents in adjoining communities to have input. So that's the important part. Right now, we were kind of locked out of the Gear Street master plan. We should have been included. So this is about participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Is Mark Bechtel here? Who's representing Parks here tonight?
Good evening, Mayor. Rob Romanak, Parks Planner.
Hi, Rob. Could you kind of give us a feeling? Lynn has suggested one of the problems that NEN has seen, and I've heard this, and I'm sure other councilors have as well. The inability to participate in a park that is really very, very close to them, and one that they did play I don't know where the idea came from. They didn't play a part in advocacy. I advocated for it myself from the beginning, and Nen was there. I think Tom knows that. Tom was there for a great deal of this, both Nen and NESCA. So I do think you ought to correct that. But what I am concerned about is that accurate? Is it accurate that both neighborhoods won't have a chance to be participants in working on this park? I always thought I could come and comment on this park if I wanted to.
Thank you, Mayor. That you're correct. Everyone in the city who is a stakeholder in the park is welcome to participate in the park's planning process, which is still a few years off, but we will welcome NEN and NESCA to participate in that process. Nothing happening tonight or before you this evening would change that. I'll also just add that we've already done some street improvements or frontage improvements around the park. And in that process, we have completed outreach with both NEN and NESCA. Yeah. And I would expect that to continue.
That you expect as the planning continues, you'll continue to do outreach to NEN and to NESCA to make sure both neighborhoods have an opportunity to talk. And I don't know what the difference is between the two. So, and what their vision of a park is, but there's a lot, 6 acres there. There's probably room for lots of ideas. So
that is correct. We would outreach to both of the neighborhood associations. And there is a statement in the staff report regarding a letter of commitment from the director and to do just that. And so we fully intend to include them both.
Okay. And that has been communicated clearly with NEN that there is a letter of, nobody has ownership here. That's the main thing, I think. It's a city park and these are the most interested neighborhoods. So, okay, great. Thanks, Rob. There may be more questions. I don't know. Virginia, do you have any questions for Rob right now?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't. I've spent a lot of time with this topic, especially in meetings with Rob earlier this week and emails and all kinds of things. So I have had all of my questions answered, but I appreciate your ability to ask questions to kind of, get the conversation going and get, the general public up to speed as well on the different issues that are a concern to both neighborhoods.
Okay, and you're satisfied both neighborhoods will have some sort of ownership in the development of a plan. You came away with that as a...
Yeah, it was one of the things that struck me first with this topic. And I have some of this written in my comments for later tonight, but was just that we have to find a clear path forward with communications and how it works between city staff, neighborhood associations, and the general public. And that's throughout the city for all parks and for all projects really that are happening in the city. We need to be better communicators. And so I am satisfied with what the letter that they have included. And I think that I've been able to clearly communicate and have felt heard by staff with my concerns. And I'm really looking forward to also the Parks Master Plan process update. That, of course, as counselors, we're policy, right? And procedures. And so that's really where one of these big takeaway for me from this whole process has been that kind of policy change that we can make sure that everybody has a fair voice in any kind of development that we have across the city.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I got to tell you, this is one very close to my heart. This is one we work very, very hard on. And I see my colleague in this, Tom Anderson, wants to speak. So we'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Am I correct in assuming that this item will be pulled from the consent agenda? Okay, so I'll save much of my comments for that, but
excellent.
I just have a question for you, Rob. I've always thought, and Mr. Mayor's right, I was very involved in the whole issue of the North Campus. I thought this was just going to be open space, like the people wanted it. It's a soccer field. So it's not going to end up being a developed park. But now we're talking about all these plans. So you don't have to answer that now, but I'd like you to answer that when the item is pulled and we discuss it.
Very good. Anyone else? I guess not. Leslie Polson.
So, and let me just share my screen really quickly.
Okay.
Righty. My name is Leslie Polson and I live at 930 Garnet Street, and I'm here to provide a solution to NEN's complaint about their loss of green space. I am proposing that here it is, NEN's border can be adjusted, and right now the city has given NEN Ward 1, which is basically most of NEN, is they've already put the park in D Street. The D Street Park is in Ward 1. So what we can do is Joan Lloyd did this beautiful artwork of basically redoing the border so we have it 25 all the way. So it's not going to be confusing. So it's not going to be 25 above market or 25 below market. It will be 25 all the way. So this would make the placement of the NEN Street Park logical. NEN started this particular conversation during its neighborhood plan, looking at changes to the state hospital grounds. It was a conversation at my table because I was with Ian and the rugby players from the state hospital who talked about this first. NEN was the first neighborhood association to advocate for the neighborhood plans to give residents the ability to have a say over their community. And NEN has been cheated for its advocacy and hard work. So this is my solution, is to look at adjusting the borders of NEN so that it is 25 all the way.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
All right, let's do that.
Okay, where are we getting that sound? Is anyone else hearing that sound, or is that just... Okay. All right, Ian Johnson.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett, members of the Salem City Council. I'm Ian Johnson. I'm the Land Use Chair for the Northeast Salem Community Association, NESCA. I hope you all can hear me. I'll wait for mad waving if that's not happening. I'm here to testify on behalf of the Neighborhood Association for Agenda Item 3A, which will be pulled. That's the amendment of the NESCA boundary. NESCA acknowledges and is empathetic to NEN's arguments, but we believe that the issues are better addressed through other means, and that NEN's proposals actually create the very same issues that they seek to address. The city processes consider a number of factors when locating infrastructure, but these considerations are not primarily based on population density or distribution of resources among neighborhood associations or what neighborhood uses a resource. Instead, it's understood that neighborhood boundaries are not walls and that any citizen or neighborhood, as we've discussed, may use whatever resource they want and be involved in public processes. Neighborhood associations serve many functions. Among them, they provide a way for citizens to participate in public processes that affect them directly, the things that literally happen next door that impacts their daily quality of lives. The D Street field is surrounded in its entirety on the north, east, and south sides by residential development that will be or is already included in NESCA that NEN has not contested. They're asking for just the parklands. Surrounding the park are the people who will be directly impacted by any decision made about the open space. Nights, weekends, all the time, they're going to be impacted. Including the field completely within NESCA ensures that those impacted by these decisions have a direct voice. To the west, 23rd Avenue already serves as the neighborhood boundary north of D Street Northeast as it is. Extending the boundary to Center Street is a logical extension of the existing boundary that separates medical uses on the west side of 23rd from residential and recreation uses on the east side. The boundary is consistent with existing city code, SRC 64-280A5, which states, quote, the contiguous geographic boundaries of the neighborhood association should be the center lines when an arterial street is used as the boundary. Now, while NEN borders the North Campus, the closest residential property is kitty corner to the northeast corner of Northeast D Street and Northeast 23rd and is not physically contiguous. And that's in the submitted maps. NESCA believes that NEN's proposal to divide the park between the two neighborhoods would diminish the voices of those who live closest to the property, those who will be impacted by what happens in the park every day. Because the total time for testimony is limited to 3 minutes, I chose not to describe in detail our advocacy efforts over time or the discussion our board has had with NEN or some of the other issues, but I can certainly answer questions if there are some. Thank you.
Okay, well, I certainly, as having gotten involved in this right at the beginning, can certainly testify to the advocacy efforts and the variety of advocacy efforts you all went through. And certainly the work you did, Ian, as the chair of NESCA, along with those from then, but it really, I think it's been a really great effort to get this put together, that we finally got the state to give us the property, and or let us sell us. I give it as wrong. They sold it to us, of course. So I'm really pleased to see this moving forward. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Johnson, for coming down and testifying. So we heard from the folks over at NEN that it sounds like there's frustration with the communication between the two neighborhood associations. And so I was just hoping to hear from you about your thoughts on that, or what, how you view communication with your neighboring neighborhood.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we had initial conversation with NEN this summer with our city, with our council board meeting that was recorded on our minutes, and it's recorded on Zoom. And we suggest what they came forward with was already a motion that they had taken, was to a council board motion to divide the park physically between the two. We suggested that we'd like to do mediation, either neighbor to neighbor or city council. I had a previous, or I'm not city council, city staff. I had a previous conversation with Lisa Anderson Ogilvie, whether she'd be willing to do that. And that was flat refused at the time. And so we engaged a little bit more back and forth, and we were given kind of the impression that this is kind of where NEN was on that. And from that point, we did break off conversations at that point, because it was not clear that there was any really point to negotiate on. The NEN board had made a decision, and that they were set on it. I see from the testimony that they said that they were willing to talk about other issues. And if that is what they're willing to do, NESCA is going to be insistent that it's be within the structure of negotiated mediation. Because we strongly feel that when they came to our meetings, it was a take it or leave it proposition. They called it a negotiation. They said it was a compromise. Well, it might have been a compromise on their board, but it certainly wasn't any point in negotiation with us. So if there's a desire by council for us to go ahead and work this out, we're certainly open to that within a established structure, and with an agreement that everyone is going to go forward and abide by that decision.
Very good. Okay. Further questions? Well, the nice thing about parks is you've got the Parks Board and the City Council and big planning, master planning. There'll be lots of opportunity to negotiate this. And,
yes.
And so I hope everyone will have a chance to participate, and will take the time. I think that's a lot of it, Ian, is that folks not feel like they're cut out of it. And I know that is not in any way the way you would want to proceed. So, yep. Okay. Very good. Well, that's everybody for this evening on that issue. So we'll move then to the consent calendar, Mr. Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the consent calendar with the exception of item 3.2A, pulled by Councilor Stapleton.
Second.
Thank you. That leaves us with item 3.1A, which are the March 14th, 2022 draft City Council minutes. 3.1B, the March 21st, 2022 City Council minutes. 3.3A, recommended appointments and reappointments to the Community Police Review Board, Downtown Advisory Board, Salem Cultural and Tourism Promotion Advisory Board, and Salem Public Arts Commission. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Very good. Any discussion? Okay, if the recorder, please call the roll.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung. Absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordijk.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We will then go to public hearings. And we'll begin with 22-116. I'll open that public hearing.
Thank you. The Salem City Council will now conduct a public hearing to consider the petitioner-initiated annexation of territory located at 2490 Michigan City Lane Northwest. The criteria applicable to the decision is SRC 260.060C. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing in person or in writing, or failure to provide statements or evidence with sufficient specificity to provide the parties and the City Council an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The hearing will begin with the staff presentation, followed by testimony from the following. The applicant is limited to 10 minutes. The applicable neighborhood association is limited to 5 minutes. Other interested parties are limited to 3 minutes, and the applicant may have up to 5 minutes rebuttal testimony limited to issues raised during the public testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Pamela Cole, planner with Community Development Department. Good evening, councilors and mayor. I'm presenting the staff report for annexation case C-743 for the territory that's identified as 2490 Michigan City Lane Northwest. And I'd like to enter the staff report, attachments, and presentation into the record. The subject property is about 9.53 acres outside right-of-way of Michigan City Lane Northwest and is contiguous to city limits on the north, south, and east. The urban growth boundaries on the north side of Michigan City Lane Northwest, and the right-of-way was previously annexed into the city. The proposed annexation would reduce the area of an existing enclave of 9 tax lots that are west of this property. Staff notified those property owners that their properties may be subject to a future annexation initiated by the city. The annexation territory is designated developing residential in the comprehensive plan map. The adjacent properties are either single-family residential or developing residential. The subject property and adjacent properties are in Polk County and are zoned suburban residential. Nearby properties in the city are zoned single-family residential. Outside the urban growth boundary, the properties are zoned for farm use. The territory will automatically be zoned city single-family residential RS upon annexation, and that's consistent with the developing residential comprehensive plan designation. Nearby properties are developed with single-family dwellings and some agricultural uses. The subject property has a single-family dwelling and some accessory buildings. Staff found that the proposed annexation met the applicable criteria, including whether it's consistent with comprehensive plan and statewide planning goals, allows orderly, efficient, and timely provision of urban services, and serves the public interest. We received comments from Public Works indicating that an urban growth area development permit would be required for development, from Parks saying that the property is outside the 0.5 mile service area of undeveloped Ellen Lane Park. Fire indicated that the response time from Station 11 would be 5 minutes, 43 seconds, and Finance projected that the total tax rate for the property would increase by approximately 56%. We also received comments from the school district indicating that upon future development, approximately 20 students would be added to schools. They'd be eligible for transportation to Brush College, Straub, and West Salem High. West Salem Neighborhood Association hasn't submitted any written comments into the record, and we didn't receive any comments from citizens. This is another voter exempt annexation, exempt from voter approval because the property owner submitted the petition and it meets the other criteria. and it may be approved by City Council. They retain the authority on whether to annex, but it may not be referred to the voters. Therefore, staff recommends that Council adopt Order 2022-2 ANX, determining that the proposal meets the criteria, applying the city zoning, and approving withdrawal from the Spring Valley Rural Fire Protection District. That concludes my presentation. If you have questions, of course, I'm available.
Thank you, Pamela. We'll begin the public hearing with the applicant's representative, Stacy Connery. Stacy, you have 10 minutes if you'd.
Thank you. My name is Stacy Connery with Pacific Community Design, 12564 Southwest Main Street, Tiger 97223, the applicant's representative tonight. And I just wanted to say thank you for the staff report and staff's assistance through this process. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them tonight.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Connery on this project? Yes, Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I presume, Ms. Connery, that the intent at some point in the future, near or far, will be to develop this property consistently with the zoning requirements of the surrounding property.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll see if we may have some later. We'll see what happens here. If you have any further comment. Neighborhood Association is represented by Steve Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor, City Councilors, and all those who expressed their condolences and love tonight. That outpouring of love was very touching, and thank you all. I'm Steve Anderson, West Salem Neighborhood Association Land Use Chair, representing the Neighborhood Association. First, we would like to thank the applicant. They were able to come to our Neighborhood Association meeting and make a presentation and make sure that the community is well informed. I want to thank Pamela Cole for her help and assistance as we worked to make sure her reports and information was on social media so the neighborhood was well informed. And I'm in an interesting position tonight, Mayor. I come as the Neighborhood Association representative, and the Neighborhood Associations chose to take a neutral position on this application, neither for or against. And so that's our official position tonight. And thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Anderson? Ms. Connery, did you want to make any closing remarks at all?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, councilors, any questions for Ms. Cole? Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I noticed one of the bullet points said that this property to be developed is outside the a half-mile radius of the nearest park. I'm wondering, Ms. Cole, if you or maybe Mr. Romanek, if he's still here, could talk about the potential for a park there, and then whether potentially SDC charges, park charges, might end up being used to secure some of that piece of property for a park.
I can answer briefly. And typically, when we have properties that are only about 10 acres or so, they're not really large enough for a park because the minimum size for a park is about 5 acres. So we didn't have a request from Parks Section to carve a park out of this annexation territory.
Great, thank you very much.
Mr. Romanek, did you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add on to that I think this is an opportunity for what's known as a temporary access fee. So the applicant would pay a little extra. We would put that toward the acquisition of a park nearby. So essentially, because it is undersized, we would collect additional fees to help us purchase a park.
And those would be similar to SDCs? Is that the?
Yes, it could be thought of as an advance payment of SDCs.
Okay, great. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I am going to close the public hearing. Councilor Varney, this is in your ward. What's your pleasure here?
Well, I guess I get to make a motion on this, right?
It's yours.
Okay, well, I move that the City Council adopt order number 2022-2, annexation determining that the proposal meets the applicable criteria, applying city zoning for the territory and approving withdrawal of the territory from the Spring Valley Rural Fire Protection District.
Second.
Second by Hoy. Do you want to speak to your motion or?
I think since the property owner initiated it and it's within the urban growth boundary and the neighborhood association has, you know, is neutral on it, I don't see any problem with it.
Nothing to lose here. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, if the recorder could please call a roll.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung. Absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordike.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. I'm going to open a public hearing on 22-117. It's item 4B on your agenda and turn that back over to you, Ms. Recorder.
The Salem City Council will now conduct a public hearing to consider the petitioner-initiated annexation of territory located at 4255 Cordon Road Northeast. The criteria applicable to the decision is SRC 260.060C. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing in person or in writing, or failure to provide statements or evidence with sufficient specificity to provide the parties and the City Council an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The hearing will begin with a staff presentation, and no individuals signed up to testify for this hearing. Thank you.
Hey,
Thank
Pamela.
you.
There she is.
Yes, tonight's second hearing is for 4255 Cordon Road Northeast, case number 744. And again, I'd like to enter the staff report, attachments, and presentation into the record. This is a smaller property that's only about 4 acres. It's outside of right-of-way of Ward Drive Northeast and Cordon Road Northeast, contiguous to city limits on the north, south, and west. The territory is designated developing residential in the comprehensive plan map along with the nearby properties. The subject property and many of the adjacent properties in Marion County are zoned Marion County Urban Transition 10 acres, and others nearby are zoned Urban Transition 5 acres. The properties in the city are zoned either RA, Residential Agriculture, or RS, Single Family Residential. For this territory, the automatic designation will be City of Salem RA Residential Agriculture, which is consistent with the developing residential plan designation. Nearby properties are developed with single family dwellings, some in subdivisions and some on larger acreage. No developments proposed for the property at this time, but the property would be suitable for a partition or subdivision in the future. Again, we found that the proposed annexation met the criteria. For comments, we received from Public Works, again, the urban growth area development permit would be required for development in the future. This property is about 0.81 mile from an undeveloped park at Stevens and Yoshikai. Fire reported that the response time would be 4 minutes, 18 seconds from Station 8, and finance estimated the tax rate would increase by about 29%. For this property, the school district estimated 8 students that would be eligible for transportation to Yoshikai, Stevens, and McKay schools. We did receive a comment from Marion County Public Works. They indicated that no intensification of the existing access onto Cordon Road would be authorized. And in the future, if the property is developed, that Cordon Road access would likely be closed and an alternate or relocated access would be required to a lower functional street or an easement. Northgate Neighborhood Association submitted no comments, and we received no comments from neighboring property owners or other members of the public. Again, this one is exempt from voter approval, and council has the authority to decide whether or not to annex, and it would not go to the vote. So staff recommends that council adopt Order 2022-3, determining that the proposal meets the criteria, applying the zoning, and approving withdrawal from Marion County Fire District Number 1. And I'm available if you have any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Cole? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing. And Councilor Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. I recommend adoption of order number 2022-3.
Second.
Second by Virginia Stapleton. Okay. Any discussion? Okay, if the recorder please call the roll.
Councilor Leung is absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We'll move on. I'm going to open the next public hearing, 22-131. It's item 4C. And let you go ahead.
All right, the City Council will now conduct a public hearing for the purpose of receiving testimony regarding Supplemental Budget 3 to amend and appropriate funds made available to the city in the fiscal year 2022 budget. The hearing will begin with staff presentation, and individuals testifying are limited to 3 minutes each. And we have about 3 folks signed up tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer. I don't have a formal presentation for you this evening, but I wanted to walk through the proposed actions included in Supplemental Budget 3. The first action is a earlier meeting this month, Council moved to add 7 full-time equivalent positions to the fiscal year 2022 budget, funded with a state sheltering grant through the end of the fiscal year. And just for clarity here, the staff will continue to recommend the state sheltering grant in next year's budget and until the cost of the team is covered and the grant is expended. The Navigation Center construction, I'm sure you guys are aware, the Marion County gave us an award. We're still waiting for the actual funds for $3 million and another $1.9 million from the state legislature to make necessary tenant improvements to the recently purchased City of Salem Navigation Center. The next item is ice storm tree planting. The city received insurance proceeds for the damage caused during the ice storm to fund a multi-year replanting program for city-owned trees. This action allows that program to begin its work within the current fiscal year. For the Emergency Medical Services Fund, the city has activated a medic unit to assist its contractor, Falk Ambulance. This action has created an additional revenue and expense in the EMS fund, as well as the need to transfer funds to the general fund to offset overtime expense. For transient occupancy tax and the tour and promotion area fee, the revenues for both the TOT, transient occupancy tax, as well as the tours and promotion area have come in higher than budgeted, which is good news. And this action is needed to recognize that revenue and additional expense to make the payments that are based directly on the level of the tax or fee. And the final action is in the traffic safety fund. Photo enforcement revenue has increased and the additional transfer authority is needed to transfer those funds to the general fund. that concludes my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions after public comment.
All right, thank you very much, Josh. We'll go then to Lori Doherty. Each of the members of the public will have 3 minutes. So Lori, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett and councilors. My name is Lori Doherty. I live in Ward 1. I want to speak to the part of the budget that refers to the community sanitation response team. Like all of you, I'm saddened and outraged at the tragic killing of 4 people and injury to others yesterday. We all know that despite the efforts of city and service providers and local nonprofits, that there are not enough places to meet the need for shelter. The agenda says that the community sanitation response team will be funded from a state sheltering grant. That's exactly what these funds must be used for, to establish safe, sanitary, stable places for people to stay. It is insane and inhumane to shove people all over the city who have no place else to go. Please have the courage and compassion to stop the sweeps and end the camping ban that you imposed. Our most vulnerable neighbors must be freed from anxiety and insecurity. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Lori? Okay, next is Alex Buron. Is Alex here?
They were here, Mayor, but I know that I believe that he or she was having audio difficulty. So if we can just wait one moment here, and
okay.
I guess if we don't hear a response, we can.
We'll come back to Alex. We'll go first to Britt Mitchell.
I just want to agree with Lori that on the budget items and when we're looking what to fund, we should be putting more money into creating shelters and not worrying about the park beautification.
Okay. Alex, any questions for Britt? Okay, Alex Buron. Okay, DJ.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett.
You weren't signed up here on this.
I was signed up for general comment, and I won't take it as an offense. I feel very honored by the council and mayor for giving such attention to our unsheltered folks, even in this tragic situation. So, Mayor, the clock is running, so I guess I've been given permission.
I'm not clear what you're doing here, Al. You signed up for later on the agenda. Did you want to testify on this budget issue? Is that?
Oh, you bet I would. What am I signed up to share for, Mayor?
You're signed up. Micro shelter funding is what you put on here, but you signed up. I bet you signed up on the wrong sheet. We'll start you over. Don't worry about it. But you're not on my list for this supplemental budget. Would you like to be?
Sure. I can talk about that, and then if there's other.
Then you're done. Okay.
Is there an agenda item on micro sheltering, sir?
You're the one that came up with it. I'm not sure.
I didn't know I had the power to.
It doesn't show up as an agenda item, but you signed up.
I'll get to my 3 minutes and honor everyone's time. Thank you so much. I want to share with you in the area of budgeting. And first of all, I always want to begin with thanks and knowing that it's this city council that has allocated funds for safe parking. It's this city council who has expanded emergency sheltering and who has created the pro shelter communities in Salem. 2 of them are active. It's this city council that's providing, safe, sanitary, and supported efforts for up to 200 people each night. I am just here to say 3 sites were approved, and so we've been developing plans for the other 2 sites that don't have funding yet. And so I'm here to advocate for funding those so that we can create more beds because the shelters themselves have been sponsored by the community. So these are the shelters on wheels that would be needed for the Turner Road location. And these are shelters being built right in West Salem. And then the safe parking needs are intense. Even this week, 40 RVs will be moved from Wallace Marine Park. Right now, we have 12 churches that have hosted safe parkers, but there's 300 folks on the wait list. We can develop at the Front Street location a spot for 40 RVs or trailers in a safe, sanitary, and supported way. This is a picture of what it looks like in Eugene. It's all monitored 24/7 with staffing, as well as the access. There's centralized services, water and sanitation hookups. So with $1.5 million, we could add 2 more sites, 40 safe parking spots, 40 micro shelter beds at Turner Road. This would serve 240 individuals in the next year, and we believe 40% of those would move on to positive destinations, HUD level housing, transitional programs. Thank you for letting me jump in here, Mayor and councilors.
Hey, thank you. Any questions for DJ? Yeah, Vanessa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. DJ, thank you so much for coming forward. And first of all, I want to express my gratitude to all of your staff. I volunteered alongside with your team serving food to the needy, and I'm extremely appreciative of all you've done. Can you tell us a little bit more about the vetting process for the shelter sites? How are people selected for these sites?
Absolutely. Our outreach team is out there with the coordinated outreach effort. We get people through an intake process. Then we use vulnerability to help with the coordinated entry. Then we call those folks in. We sit down with them for up to an hour, walking through the community expectations and figure out, is the site going to work for them?
Great. And do you, and Mr. Mayor, one follow-up if I may. What kind of rules do you put in place to ensure the safety of those not only staying there, but the staff and any volunteers who come to the shelter area?
Yeah, it's low barrier in terms of we don't exclude at the beginning, but then again, we have 3 pages of expectations around personal safety, respect, how people are going to care for their items, how they're going to respect their neighbors and staff. Then we have a clear follow-up process if any of those expectations aren't met.
Thank you, DJ. And thank you also for all the outreach that Church Park has been doing in light of the tragedy that happened downtown. I sincerely appreciate it.
DJ, will you have any plans on these? I'm trying to remember on drop-in. We heard about this from the Cascade Gateway folks out at Paradise Island, that the problem's not the folks that are housed and have met with you and gotten all signed up. It's bringing in other folks who are not signed up, who are camping around the site and all that. How are you all going to handle that?
Yeah, we're absolutely going to operate in reality right now. So right now, we don't have the funding for the micro shelters. And so we're offering day services to redirect and navigate folks. If we're awarded the funding for the micro shelters, we plan to put a fence up and create a safe sanitary space and see, what is viable, if anything else, on the property.
Okay. Doesn't sound like you're fully there in terms of stopping the folks just coming in as a navigation center, or do you want to continue that kind of program, drop in?
Right now, that is our site to redirect all the safe parkers, to redirect all the folks to positive services, which we're doing on a regular daily basis. So if funds are allocated for the micro shelter community, then we're very willing to evaluate if those kind of drop-in services should be offered elsewhere.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I see that Alex showed up.
I see Councilor Stapleton has had her hand up as well.
Well, thanks, DJ. What do you want, Virginia?
Thank you, Mayor. I thank you, DJ, for coming down and for always your advocacy for this really important topic. My question is probably for Kristen Rutherford. Earlier today, we heard about a pause in the progress that we've been making on Center Street. Is there any opportunity for us with this new development to include some kind of development either on Turner Road or on Front Street? How does that all fit together for us as we're moving forward and trying to get people into some kind of managed camping and sheltering locations?
So we do have funding that we allocated to activate a site at Center Street. That funding could be shifted to another location. However, we would still be at the beginning process with Front Street. There's nothing to say that we wouldn't encounter a similar situation on Front Street. I think it would be warranted to at least move forward to the response and see how things play out with the Center Street site before shifting funding to a different location. Because the consequence could be that we end up getting further behind.
Questions for DJ? Anyone else?
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bennett. And thank you, DJ, for your continued advocacy for making Salem a better place. What we're doing right now is a public hearing on approving some funding and accepting it into our official apparatus. And this overlaps with a lot of the work that you do in the sense that, we're getting funding for the Navigation Center and the Community Sanitation Response Team. Now, with the developments that have happened at the Center Street, which have had to be paused due to the writ of review or whatever legalistic thing that's happened there, I might be oversimplifying, but it seems like that's part of the community's pushback because this is also new for the city of Salem. These things have only been around for a few years. And I think that people in the community, have had concerns that we didn't have the full-time employees as a city to, create more assurances and expected behaviors. So it's certainly my hope that the Community Sanitation Response Team would help address some of the concerns and potentially make people less reticent to have a managed shelter in their community. DJ, do you think that the Community Sanitation Response Team helps kind of alleviate some of those community concerns that come to having these managed micro shelter sites and to a certain extent addressing concerns with the day services that your organization provides?
I'm a big believer in both and I've been sitting on all these calls and hearing the needs of city sanitation to have dedicated resources. And obviously we all want our city to be livable and for even those trash services to be offered to folks. So Church of the Park will be first in line, to offer a request, a proposal for what it would look like for us to engage with the city on sending out more outreach, more education, more redirection for folks who find themselves in dangerous spaces.
Thank you for that response. I think it's helpful. I mean, this, like you said, this is yes and, budgeting is a moral document and these are hard decisions. But I think to move forward on this, I do think that the public hearing and the funding that we're talking about tonight is constructive and helps us move forward.
Agreed.
Any further questions for DJ? Thank you, DJ. Alex, I thought I saw you appear here for a minute. Alex Buren?
I'm here.
There you are.
Can y'all see me? Or I think it's just, you guys are gonna just listen to me then.
Sure.
All right. So my name is Alex Buron. I live in Ward 6. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Hold on, I'm getting something popular. All right, so I live in Ward 6 and I'm calling in regards to talk about the funds that the city of Salem has and for the unhoused neighbors that we have. So I'm a community organizer in Northeast Salem. And for the last 20 years, I've seen Salem place a greater value on commerce. And today I see that reflected in the sidewalks. I see that reflected I see that reflected in where housing is built. I see that reflected in our transportation because the city of Salem has never prioritized working class people, poor people, people of color. And like I mentioned, we see that in the sidewalks or the lack of sidewalks and the lack of transportation that helps everybody out, especially working class people, or the housing that's not being built, or when it is built, how it's built in heavily polluted areas. And unfortunately, just 2 days ago, we saw it, the lack of compassion that the city has for human beings. Unfortunately, six people or 5 people have died from an accident that could have been prevented. I was one of the people that was helping our neighbors move out when the city of Salem decided to move displaced human beings in no direction. That yesterday's last Saturdays or Sunday mornings, tragic events could have been prevented. And I find it quite unhumane to kick out people without having a place for them to go. And I'm here to say that the funds should go to a navigation center. The funds should go to for people to get help with mental help. Also, the funds should go to a response team that doesn't criminalize people for having mental health problems. Unfortunately, last month, someone's life was taken by the hands of police at Northgate Park, who simply could have had someone de-escalate the situation. And I'm also here to also say that none of the funds go into policing our unsheltered population. Also, I'm here to also say that the ban on camping should be lifted.
Alex, I'm sorry, time's up. Does anyone have any questions for Alex? Okay. Now, staff, any questions for staff? Yes, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. This relates to the Community Sanitation Response Team. It says the grant will continue to offset the cost of this team until expended. When is that fund? Are those funds going to be depleted? And at the time the funds are depleted, that response team is done? It's not going to be in existence anymore? I guess that's a question for Josh.
Good question. I'm going to share my screen just real quick and show you a spreadsheet. I know you guys love spreadsheets. So right now, the state sheltering grant is $10.5 million. And there's also a few other funding sources that are out there with the state legislature. So if I may, I know this is a lot of numbers. We have several different activities going on here. We have the Navigation Center. We have the 2 grants we talked about for the tenant improvements at the Navigation Center. Here's the state sheltering grant, $10.5 million. This is one scenario of that spending plan. You know, council hasn't taken formal action to allocate that complete $10.5 million. The verbiage in the staff report was that when the proposed budget comes to you this next year, we're going to be recommending that the response service team, the community sanitation response service team, will be recommended to be funded by the state sheltering grant, that $10.5 million, or another funding source that's come in from the state legislature that you'll see in the next couple months. We haven't gotten final documentation on those other funding pieces.
Then, Mr. Mayor, I have a follow-up question,
Sure.
if I may.
Go ahead.
There was some concern that this money potentially could be allocated to, I'm paraphrasing here, actually housing people as opposed to the community response team. And I'd like you to respond to that if you could.
I can respond to the eligibility, and that's accurate, that it could be used for other purposes. We also have a couple other funding pieces coming to you that could be used for other purposes, but I'll defer to Kristen for the larger question there.
Great, thank you.
Yes, you're correct that it could be used for funding. I see Gretchen has just turned her camera on as well and may join in this conversation here in a moment. It comes down to a policy decision as to where council determines these funds are best used. We have multiple needs in the community. We absolutely have needs for shelter. We also have needs for public sanitation and other kinds of responses where there are impacts to neighbors within the community. And so staff has taken an approach to try to best balance these different needs and sometimes competing needs with allocating the majority of these funds to sheltering, sheltering through the navigation centers, sheltering through the micro shelters, and then with another portion to keep up with requests for public sanitation and safety that requires an ongoing dispatch of staff from public works staff through our outreach teams with police participation as well to facilitate, noticing sites and then coming in and then cleaning up those sites. And Gretchen, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that policy discussion?
Thank you for asking. No, I thought that was a perfect discussion.
Okay. Kristen, could you, we talked a little about this earlier today, but talk just a little bit about it, but look at traffic, that traffic portion for a section. I was real interested in the traffic cameras, how that is all working, what the funding looks like. Do those work? We're always looking for traffic calming, traffic control devices. And I was kind of impressed with some of the numbers I heard today.
Absolutely. So this is shifting to a different item that is in this budgetary item before you. And these are our speed on green cameras and our red light cameras. And I'll let Josh speak up to this budgetary adjustment and then what we're seeing in terms of overall response and revenue.
Sure, just real quick. Back in 2020, we started to add speed on green cameras. We started with one intersection and we've seen revenue start to come in from that. This last year, it was a slow build, adding intersections. So we've seen the revenue increase beyond what was budgeted. And these revenues are unrestricted. We use them to offset costs in the general fund. There's no expectation of that funding. It just offsets the cost of services in the general fund. As far as the effectiveness of the traffic enforcement, I'm going to see if the police chief could weigh in on that.
Yes, thanks, Josh, Mayor and Council. Trevor Womack, Chief of Police. The program is absolutely effective. So we have 6 cameraed intersections in our community. 4 of those 6 also have speed on green. So there's 6 red light photo enforcement cameras. 4 of those also have speed enforcement capability. And those were more recently added, like Josh mentioned. This goes back to 2008 for our community with our first original 3 cameras. When you look at those first original 3 intersections, and some of the data there is quite impressive, actually, that we've seen about a 50% reduction in violations at those intersections. And we've seen about an 87% reduction in crashes at those 3 original intersections. The more recent intersections are just since 2020, so we don't have as much data available, but we're looking back on the longer term intersections, pretty dramatic results there. Even with a 60 to 65% increase in traffic volume as we've grown in the city, we've greatly reduced our crashes there. So, and then we know speed and red light are the more serious crashes, which tend to have more serious injuries as well. So when you're looking at an 87% injury reduction or crash reduction, those are significant crashes normally. So there's a lot of improved safety for our community from the result. But I want to emphasize again that this is not about revenue generation whatsoever. This program for us is about traffic safety.
Right. I'm wondering, Kristen or Chief, are you going to add more of these? We've got some streets that have just some real problems, and you pick your ward, and your counselors can tell you which streets where we're having some real live problems. I mean, we're getting the, 50, 55 on Market Street's the one I see. I've seen some new speeding on Center and D, and that's my neighborhood. So I'm just curious, where are you looking at placing more of these and beginning a process of looking for those sensitive areas? Clearly, Front Street had a problem the other night. I don't know what Front Street's like, except that it seems real fast. But I'm not sure. Have you got these streets identified and ready to go? Put these things up?
Yeah, I would say that there is a selection process. I don't have the information on hand right now, but there's a certain criteria that we look at to analyze an intersection. And so we need to look at the volume there. We need to take some data on how many violations are occurring to justify the camera, because the cost is also an expense to make sure the program pays for itself. So there is a criteria that we use, and I could come back with another informational item with more detail on how we would do that, but it is based on data collected at the specific intersections. And so it's not speed on long stretches of roadways. It's all tied to intersections, because they're red light cameras that also have speed on green capability. So it would have to be an analysis on each direction coming into an intersection as far as the volume of traffic, the number of violations that are occurring, and whether that justifies a new camera.
So you would anticipate bringing that kind of request to council this year, this coming budget year? Is that?
I wasn't anticipating that, but that's something we can explore, yes.
Kristen, are you?
We can certainly discuss it. It sounds like there's council interest in us bringing forward some more locations.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm interested, but I don't know. Everybody.
I'm seeing a lot of nodding.
Okay. I just want to make sure that it just seems like a real, that information and this kind of funding, the additional funding, and then to find out how successful they are. I kind of hate to not take advantage of it when we know about it. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to put another plug in, as I have for the past few years, for advocating for a law change at the state level to allow the city of Salem to have mobile speed devices like some other cities in Oregon are allowed to have. For some reason, it was limited to just, I think, 3 cities within Oregon. And I've started that conversation this past session. I won't be there for the next session, but hopefully one of our local legislators will. And I think the city really ought to advocate for just either adding Salem to that list that can do that kind of enforcement, or just removing the restriction from the others. I can tell you in cities that do have mobile speed enforcement, people don't speed nearly as much in those cities, because you're going to get a ticket because there's a van sitting somewhere that you didn't anticipate. That's the kind of thing we could put on Market Street. We could move it to Center Street. You could deploy it all over the place instead of just having our radar trailer, which is nice. This actually would give a little bit more incentive to follow the law, because it would send you a ticket. And so I really encourage us to strongly advocate for this in the next session of the legislature.
Yeah, great point, Councilor. Thank you. Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you so much. I had a quick question about the ice storm tree planting insurance funds that are coming in. Will that money be set aside for that specific use? Will it get back to planting new trees, or will it just go back to the general fund?
Excellent question. So those insurance proceeds are actually in trust and agency, so they're held for separately. And then as the expense is incurred in the general fund, we'll transfer that amount accordingly. We're thinking it'll last about 3 years at this point.
Okay. Any further questions of staff? Councilor Nordike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Comment and then a question. Going back to the funds that are being set aside for the garbage and sanitation response team, I've expressed some concerns about it in the past. I've ultimately voted in favor of it, and I intend to do so tonight. But I just want to remind my peers that garbage is a byproduct of homelessness, and the more people we house, the less garbage we will have. So I support and agree with our interim city manager. The vast majority of our funds need to go to ensuring a roof over every head. In addition to that, I'd point out the fact that depending on which data set you look at, about 30% of our unsheltered here locally have some form of mental illness. And between 20 and 40% struggle with drug addiction, according to the Mid-Willamette Homeless Alliance. The ability to manage your own affairs and maintain proper hygiene and dispose of trash can be a challenge for these vulnerable populations. So the more we invest in services, the more we connect these individuals to ways to assist them with what their needs are, the less burden we will have. So I understand the need to address the garbage now, but when I look at the long-term usage of this $10.5 million, I caution this council on investing so many future resources. And I know we're not going to talk about fiscal year 2023 or 2024 in great detail right now, but I know that that's what our staff proposal is for the future. And I anticipate we will have other opportunities to save people. And I want to remind folks, the crisis that just happened on our streets yesterday at 2 a.m. is a solemn reminder of why we must continue to prioritize shelter. So that's a comment I had to make. I actually did have a question about the medic unit. The staff report mentioned that there's been revenue as well as expense impacts from this, but I couldn't tell, is the inclusion of a medic unit a net increase in expenses that you are asking us to spend city dollars on?
I believe it's neutral. So we activated a medic unit, which means we're billing for that service. And I see the fire chief popping on. But what happens when we bill for that service is we have a bad debt expense. So when we can't collect it, we have to write it off basically as an expense. So we need the corresponding authority. We can collect the revenue all day long, but we can't actually write off that expense without this action. And then the other item is transferring funds to the general fund to pay for the overtime for the firefighters who are actually running that medic unit. And I'll defer to the chief for more detail.
Yes, thanks, Councilor. That is completely accurate. We were pressed to put an ambulance in service this year to assist Falk with the national recruitment of paramedics is very strained during the COVID pandemic, and they are struggling, like many other ambulance providers around the country, to recruit paramedics. And so they've been short an ambulance in the system, and because the fire department in the city of Salem is the EMS provider for the city, it's our responsibility to make sure that we maintain the service for the citizens. And so we've done that. We've staffed an ambulance. This will be our 4th month of the year. They are working diligently to recruit new employees, Falk is, and to get themselves back up on their feet. So we're hopeful that in May we'll be able to turn our ambulance back off. But we've had to expend overtime dollars to staff that. Remember, we do have an EMS fund that has a little over $2.5 million in it. That's for the very express purpose of making sure we can keep the EMS system running the way it needs to be run to take care of the community. So we have used those funds. This transfer will help us with that. The revenue that we've collected from billing, because when we run the call, we bill for the call. And so we gain some revenue there. That will be part of the transfer. And then the balance will be, our general fund overtime to make sure that we balance our budget at the end of the year. But most of the expense will come from the EMS fund.
Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Any further questions of staff? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing then. And Councilor Hoy, is that yours there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move City Council adopt Resolution 2022-22, appropriating $7,606,950 and amending the fiscal year 2022 budget.
Second.
Second by Phillips. Any further discussion on it, do you think?
I think it's all been said.
Okay, great. Okay. If the recorder would please call a roll.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordike.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung. Absent Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, well, do you want to take a break or do you want to finish another one?
I was going to suggest a break either now or right after this next motion, which should be fairly brief.
Fairly quick. Why don't we do it real quick and then we'll move along. Let's go to 4D. It's 22-135. Councilor Hoy, does this just begin with a motion from you?
I believe so. So I move City Council open and continue the public hearing to May 9th, 2022 without taking public testimony at this time.
Second.
Second by Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see the city attorney has popped in. I'm not sure if he wants to comment, but basically some new information has been received, and this will give staff and others time to review that information before we consider it in a public hearing. So that's the purpose of opening it tonight and waiting for testimony until a future date.
Great. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to emphasize that, you know, today we're not taking any testimony, but on May 9th, it will be public testimony will be taken then. So it's not like we're not going to let the public talk to us about this. We're just not tonight because we need the staff response to a late report.
Okay, very good. Okay, any further discussion? Anything, Mr. Atchison, that you need to say? Magic words?
No, sir. Just want to be available for you if you had questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. If the recorder would please call a roll.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordike.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung. Absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. And we'll take a 5-minute break, but we will reopen in 5 minutes. Okay. Okay, call the meeting back to order. We'll move on to special orders of business, starting with 5A. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move City Council affirm the Planning Administrator's decision approving phased subdivision tentative plan case number SUB21-09 with the applicant's proposed modifications dated March 9th, 2022, and the additional conditions of approval in this report.
Second.
Second by Stapleton. Okay, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The applicant basically, as I understand it, as I read it, has gotten probably about 95 or maybe even higher % of the way to my motion from our previous meeting. I think there's one tree and one lot that they felt had to go that I had asked them to maintain. The tree is in a right of way that so it's necessary to be removed for the utilities. And regardless of whether that lot is there or not, so they put the lot back in that I had proposed to eliminate. So I feel like they got us to the best resolution that we could get to in terms of this project. So I'm supporting
very good. Thank you, Councilor Hoy. Any discussion? Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. First, the comment. I know the comment period and response for the applicant was extended to 5 o'clock today, but we just got 9 pages of single spaced response from them right around 5 o'clock. I'm a lawyer. I understand you wait deadlines. You got getting it at 5 o'clock as good as getting it from the legal purposes at 1 o'clock, but we're a volunteer counselor. We're in council. We've been in meetings from 5:15 on. So it's hard to get a review of this. And I see that Mr. Atchison's had his hand up. But my first question is, I've been trying to read this, and their executive summary, it says, this is a limited land use housing development application. Therefore, Council is required by law to approve the application if it satisfies all clear and objective criteria set forth in the Salem Revised Code.
Okay.
What does that mean, Mr. Atchison? What does limited land use housing development mean?
Mr. Atchison, your hand's up. Go for it.
Thank you. Dan Atchison, City Attorney. Limited land use decision is a term of art in ORS Chapter 197. It basically means it's a decision made with limited discretion. It's just a type of land use decision. Some procedural requirements will apply to it that aren't particularly relevant to this discussion.
Okay.
So if I can
one could look at it as kind of a scary thing to say to us. It's a limited land use, but you're saying it's just a legal term that isn't as frightening as I thought it might be.
Well, fear.
You don't know how frightening I thought it was, but it couldn't seem like it was frightening.
So essentially, as far as the limited land use decision goes, it means we have to have the criteria that will apply to it have to be reduced to our code. Comp plan provisions and things like that don't apply because they're already included within our code. Like I said, so that's not really particularly relevant in this instance. The needed housing piece we've talked about a bit. He's kind of combining 2 terms there with needed housing and limited land use decision.
Okay. Then
sorry.
I have a few more, but I'll defer to the other counselors if they have.
I wanted to make sure Atchison had his hand up before that, and he may have had some guidance he wanted to share. And I don't want to interrupt him on that if you don't mind.
Sure. In regard to the late testimony, that's the final written argument period was 5 p.m. So they submitted it timely. We also have a 120-day issue where we need to make a decision. So we really can't kick the can down the road to give more time to read it. I did get an opportunity to read the submission. I would say 7 pages of the submission are things you had probably read 2 or 3 times already for that they've submitted. And then the last couple of pages respond to specific comments that were submitted during this latest comment period, which you've also probably read before in one form or another.
Okay. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. This was kind of an issue last time, and it has continued to be an issue. there's a sentiment out there that we denied this thing, so why are we reconsidering it? We denied it once, why do it again? And I understand the legal reasons why we have to look at it again, but maybe, and you explained it at the last meeting too, Mr. City Attorney, but maybe you could do that again, please.
Certainly, thanks, Dan Atchison, City Attorney. This is kind of a new one to me because one, we don't often deny subdivisions. But there's a provision in state law for applications for needed housing that basically, or applications for housing, excuse me, that basically say if we're going to deny a decision, we need to give them specific reasons why, and they have an opportunity to come back and modify their application, essentially have a do-over. I understand the folks who may be frustrated by that, but that's the provision in state law. It's been in there for a while. It is evidence of the state legislature's desire to provide more housing. And to make sure that, you know, if there's housing applications out there, we can get to yes by meeting the criteria that they should be approved.
Okay. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Atchison, I was hoping that you could just take the opportunity to sort of talk for a moment. I think it's good because we don't deal with these too often. I think it's always a good idea to help people understand what our decision-making sort of purview is here. We call this a quasi-judicial hearing for a reason, and that's because, as I understand it, we are acting sort of like judges. We're not quite judges, but we're acting in that capacity. We're not acting necessarily as city councilors. When we act as a city councilor, we might do what we think is best, or what we think our neighbors or neighborhoods want, what's popular, because we're elected by the people. So we might do things that are popular. But in this case, that's not really what we get to do. We have to apply the law to the situation and the application, as I understand it. So we might not like something that we're going to approve, but it's really the duty that we have to apply the law under the oaths we have taken as city councilors, as I understand it. Is that a fair assessment on what we're dealing with here?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I just think it's important for people to understand we don't always make these decisions because we like them. It's because that we're duty bound. And I take that oath very seriously, as I know my colleagues do. And so sometimes we just have to try to get to the best potential outcome that we can for the community. And that's what I tried to do with my original motion. And I think that's what the applicant has done. They've gotten very close to my original motion. So I think it's possible, you know, it's the best outcome we could hope for given the difficult situation.
Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Hoy, for asking that question for clarification, because I think it's such a interesting part of our jobs here and something that's not well understood by the public, and something that makes our job really hard. You know, I keep, in the times that I've been on council and the times that I was paying attention before, these all seem to be pretty hard decisions sometimes. So I wanted to ask a question. I'm not sure if I can or if I have the right wording, and I think this is for Dan. What is the risk that we're taking as a council if we vote no on this?
Dan Atchison, City Attorney. So the process would be that it would go to the Land Use Board of Appeals if someone chose to appeal the city's decision, and that's whether you approve or deny the application. The standard at the Land Use Board of Appeals, or LUBA, is, you know, did they have adequate findings to support the decision? Is there adequate evidence in the record or substantial evidence in the record to support those findings? And, you know, did we follow the law? Did we make an error in interpretation, or did we just disregard the law? In some circumstances, in the more rare circumstances, the Land Use Board of Appeals will actually reverse a city decision and say, no, you acted outside the scope of your authority. You really got it wrong, and you essentially have to make a different decision. And in those rare cases, the person who filed the appeal could be eligible for attorney's fees. The more common result is they remand it, which means that we committed one or more errors, and we've got to correct the decision. And in some cases, the same decision can be issued, but with different findings and facts. In other cases, the error was so, you know, fundamental to the decision that you really have to make a different decision.
Yes, Councilor Stapleton. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you for a follow-up here. Could we lose the progress we've made? You know, I feel like we're kind of in a compromising situation here, but if it does go to a no vote and they do, you know, appeal and go to LUBA, could we lose this progress and be back at square one?
That's highly speculative, and I don't want to add new evidence into the record at this point, but, you know, certainly an applicant could come back and give you a whole different proposal.
Thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. I want to follow up on Councilor Stapleton's questions and Mr. Atchison's reply, and I can draw a rough analogy on this to the Costco case. If you'll recall, the council originally voted against the Costco application out there on Kuebler Boulevard, and we gave some reasons, mostly related to the trees, that there were no reasonable alternatives for the trees, and there were some other minor issues, but that was really the main grounds that we said we were not going to allow it. Well, the developers appealed. LUBA said that we made some procedural errors in our decision. That was appealed by the some of the neighborhood people to the Court of Appeals. And the Court of Appeals came out with an opinion that I'm a lawyer giving kind of a layperson's analysis of this. And what the Court of Appeals said, in my view, is the criteria that you use to deny this application at Costco are not valid criteria. You cannot use those criteria to deny the application. So it came back to us, and at that point, we had no other alternative but to approve the application because the court told us the ones we used weren't good. And I'm an officer of the court. I mean, I still didn't like it, but I knew I had to vote for it. And I think the vote on that thing was only one councilor still voted to deny it, but I think the rest of the council was like, okay, you know, we've been told what we have to do and we did it. So that's a potential outcome here. And that also relates to Councilor Hoy's discussion with the city attorney's help that, you know, we're in a different situation here where we're more judges than we are elected government officials in this particular case, which makes it hard.
Okay.
I just wanted to note, I forgot to mention this at the outset, that Councilor Varney will not be participating in the deliberations or the vote, given the fact that she's had an opportunity to review the previous testimony and any possible ex parte contacts that she may have had prior to becoming a councilor.
Okay, Councilor Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett, and thank you, City Attorney Dan Atchison. So I think that there are important points that all of my colleagues have raised about, you know, the quasi-judicial nature of this process and that we kind of function as jurors. That being said, I do have a couple of questions just to kind of highlight that, you know, Councilor Anderson's comments on Costco are certainly interesting and kind of shed some light as to this process. But City Attorney Dan Atchison, I believe in a prior meeting, you said that that's kind of a different process because it was a zoning case, and this is more of a specific development and it's residential as opposed to commercial. So are there differences with that case and this case?
There are. I understand, Dan Atchison, City Attorney, I do understand Councilor Anderson's point between, you know, doing what you think is right versus doing what you think you have to do, which the same principle applies here. The Costco decision was a site plan decision. A different criteria was at play as far as the trees there, and there's different criteria there. You know, other than that, Councilor Anderson's analogy applies.
So thank you. I think that's a great way to clarify that. And then I guess like what I remember from that Costco case is that they did ultimately relocate the trees. And that, you know, we learned how that worked, but they did move them. So there was some criteria. And I mean, are you telling me there's no criteria right now that we have any wiggle room on trees?
I would defer to Lisa Anderson Ogilvie to answer that question.
Okay, fair.
Lisa, are you here?
I am. Hi. Lisa
Hi.
Anderson Ogilvie, your planning administrator. City attorney was doing so well, and he really gave me a hard one here. I mean, the criteria related to trees is that there's no reasonable design alternatives to remove the Oregon white oaks. And the council might remember a few months ago that we changed the tree ordinance, and part of that long drawn out hearing was to define what would be a reasonable design alternative or what would allow you to easily remove a significant tree. And we came up with a list that's in the code today, but that list doesn't apply to this because they were in process before our new ordinance. So under the current code or the old code that applies to them, it's really not defined, but we generally look at things like street layout, utilities, grade, and on their new revised plan, as Aaron can go over it, if it's helpful to you, the trees that they're proposing to remove are in the street or for utility easement. So they're no longer proposing to remove any significant white oaks just to build a house. So when you think of it that way, it's hard to say that there's a more reasonable design alternative when it's just for street and utilities, in staff's opinion.
Okay.
Just to clarify.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, more difficult, but there's no instructions that come with that wording. It's more difficult, but not necessarily impossible.
Yeah.
Or that was some of the reasoning done with that Costco case too. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't want to repeat any of my fellow councilors' comments, but I do want to share some of the good news is that I know that people look at these as just new home sales, but for those that aren't aware, it causes a chain reaction of activity. The people that buy these properties are usually people that they're not usually first-time buyers, they're move-up buyers. So they're selling their house to a first-time buyer. And those people free up rental housing. Usually it's cramped. They've outgrown where they're at. So they're moving up. And it's just, each sale should cost 3 to 4 opportunities for people to move. And that's where at the lower end, entry-level rental housing gets freed up. It's either gets built or it gets freed up. And this is just one of the ways it happens, so.
Councilor Gonzalez, do you happen to recall, I have a number in my head, but I'm not sure it's correct, but what the vacancy rate is right now you're describing?
If I can interrupt for a moment, you guys,
yeah.
I'm sorry, you guys.
Are we off the
council is prohibited from adding new evidence into the record at this point, so I'd like to avoid citation of statistics and whatnot.
Oh, okay, sorry. Good point, Gonzalez. You're right on the money. Councilor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm going to look at some statistics here too, although I'm reminded of the Mark Twain quote, there are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics. But I was curious myself as to how many acres of this property, 29 acres, are still going to be open acreage. That is not homes built on it, but still have some trees and some other things. And it looked to me like there's 4.87 acres by the Meyer farmhouse, 3.14 acres on the northwest corner, and 0.53 acres on the northeast corner. I added those up. They come to 8.53 acres. I divided 8.53 by the 29.6 acres total, and I come to the conclusion that there's about 29% of this property is going to be open space even after it's all developed. Then I'm sort of curious, two things, Ms. Anderson Ogilvie. The first one is if you could just delineate the 2 extra conditions that are in Mr. Ahoy's motion. I mean, we know it as a council, but I'm not sure all the people who are watching and everybody else knows it. And then finally, there's been some off and on discussion of middle housing or duplexes or something else on this property. So if you could comment to both of those, please.
Sure. So in the staff report, there's 2 recommended additional conditions, and they were in Councilor Hoy's motion. The applicant is proposing to do these as part of their revised proposal. The first one is that in phase 1, they would install speed bumps or speed humps on Albert Street Southeast, which is a local street near the subject property. And then with phase 2, when they widen 12th Street, which abuts the property, they would install all-way stop signs at the intersection of 12th and Lansford Drive. So those were discussed in the previous hearing, and I think they were in Councilor Hoyt's previous motion when the project was denied, and the applicant has agreed to do those things. And then about middle housing. So, you know, the council has adopted our middle housing ordinance, and it is effective now. So anybody in the city can do middle housing, a duplex on any lot zoned for single family, and a triplex, quadplex, a cottage cluster, depending on the lot size. So the applicant does have the ability now to do, you know, duplexes or triplexes or something like that, potentially to make up for the lots that they have removed from their proposal. So that is a way that they could still achieve the original density that they had proposed.
And by my calculation, they are removing about 10% of their original proposal lots. They went from 139 to 126. That's 13 pieces of property.
Yes.
And then my final question, Mr. Mayor, is we had this submission by Mr. Santana, both at the prior hearing and then this hearing, with what he called the reasonable alternative. And I would appreciate if you could respond to that.
I think that's my cue. Let me load up.
Yeah, there we go. You didn't mean me.
No, I didn't mean that. Well, you can respond if you want, Mr. Mayor, but
no, I wouldn't have been helpful.
So good evening, councilors. My name is Aaron Panko with the Community Development Department. So I can pull up the piece of testimony received from Santana. So what he shows here is an alternative configuration for Hilfiger. So he has looked at some of the curvature requirements for the street, and he's come up with a plan that shifts the alignment further to the west to avoid all of the significant trees in this area. This is all the information that we have, though, on this plan, and there's some things that are missing on this for staff to do a full analysis on it. It doesn't show topography for the site. We know that that's a challenge on this, and Hilfiger, the applicant, is already requesting a alternative street standard to increase the grade allowance there. We also know that some of the lots here don't meet lot standards. Some of the street spacing has changed. In our intersections, there may be a concern with these not meeting our standards. So he's addressed, I think, one question, but there's other information here that we would need to do a full assessment, and it doesn't appear to meet standards.
Okay.
Follow up. So what you're saying is this is not a reasonable alternative because of the issues that you've discussed in your just right now.
Yeah, I mean, it would need further modification or need adjustments to our standards in order to be approvable.
Yeah, okay. And we don't have the time for that in terms of the 120 days.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the risk of introducing new information, I don't think I am, but I just wanted to respond to something that Councilor Phillips had asked about, and that's the trees, Costco being moved. That was a voluntary issue, as I recall. That's not something we required them to do. That's something they chose to do sort of as a goodwill gesture to the community. That wasn't part of our order, as I recall. It's not something we were able to require. So because you were trying to draw a comparison to this situation, I really don't think there is one in that way.
I think you're correct. Okay. Councilor Phillips.
I'll try to be brief. So I still plan to vote no on this. I think this is a tough vote. I still think that there is the possibility of reasonable design alternatives that with a nominal change to the proposed Hilfiger positioning could preserve at least 3 additional significant trees. And I remain concerned about the safety on 12th Street with a grade of 17.9%, which is a variant from our street standards. I mean, that being said, I really appreciate the time and diligence that staff have taken to answer council questions and address community questions raised throughout this process. And we do need more housing at all levels throughout the city, especially near the core network. So this is a tough one, but I plan to vote no.
Okay, very good. Anyone else want to comment further? Okay. How many votes do we need to pass this, or?
You have 7 participating members, with Councilor Leung being absent, so 4 votes will pass a motion.
Okay. Let's have the recorder call a roll.
Councilor Nordike.
Nay.
Councilor Varney is abstaining. Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Nay.
Councilor Phillips.
Nay.
Councilor Leung is absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, I believe the motion passes. Did I get that right? Okay,
That is-
motion passed.
Yes.
Okay, good. Motion passes. All right, thank you very much. I'm sure for folks, these are hard votes. So we'll go to information items.
3.2A first, Mr. Mayor.
Whoops, I'm sorry. That's right. Somebody held one back, didn't they? Just a sec, let me find it here. Stapleton.
Thank you. I move staff recommendations.
Second.
Second by Hoy.
Thank you. I have some things to say here. I've written them out over the past couple of days as I've been thinking about this vote. Thank you for the few moments here to read this. Over the past several months, I've gotten to know more and more about this park and its history. I've talked with staff, a few of my colleagues, both neighborhood associations, community members, previous counselors, and state representatives. I have heard people's concerns and questions. I have researched and asked about each and every one of them. Over the course of this time, a couple of things have stood out to me, one of which I spoke about a little bit earlier today, but I'll reiterate. Communication. Communication is key and needs to increase. This is critical for residents to feel heard and respected and a part of the process. Green space in densely populated areas of Salem needs to be considered as we develop further. We are growing and we will become only more densely populated, and access to green space is critical for all of our residents across the city. As a counselor, my job is to set priorities and policy, and although I am a counselor for Ward 1, I represent and work for the city as a whole. When this issue started to heat up, I asked staff to take me to the 30,000-foot level. And regardless of people and personalities and history, I wanted to know what made sense as far as a line to be drawn. When they showed me their plans, I agreed with their decision. This line is invisible, and the park will serve everyone in the area, regardless of neighborhood association. This should be a celebration. And it saddens me greatly that I find myself having to have this conversation instead. We have 2 wonderful neighborhood associations full of passionate, dedicated community members. And I'm saddened that they are at each other in this way and that their relationships have been strained. Both NIN and NESCA have done amazing things for this area of town. And my hope is that they can reconcile their differences and find a way to move on, working together for the common good. My goals moving forward as a counselor are to address the need for more parkland in all areas of Ward 1 and across the city, and to ensure that our communication processes improve. Lastly, I would like to encourage staff to look at the remaining areas of the city that are in state lands, but are not yet in a neighborhood association, and to get this corrected as soon as we can so that we are not running into issues like this in the future.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, at the risk of extending this meeting too long, since I know we have 2 more meetings after this, I want to co-sign on everything my colleague from Ward 1 just said. I agree with 100% of what she said. We have an amazing park here that the people that can use it today are going to be able to use it tomorrow. Which neighborhood gets to call it their own, I think, is largely irrelevant in terms of the future of this park. To me, the staff has come up with a perfectly reasonable recommendation that when I look at it objectively, ignoring the parties, I come to the same conclusion. So I plan to support the motion. Thank you.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I agree with my fellow councilors, and I note that at one point this was my ward, but it's not, or in my ward, now it's not anymore. So I respect the views of both these councilors. And I also am saddened by this kind of internecine warfare between two neighborhood groups. I think I think they all ought to come together and work on how that part can be developed. And I think the city staff made an administrative decision, and it's the correct administrative decision. And I will tell you, Mr. Mayor, that you alluded a little bit to your efforts and my efforts with respect to the North Campus of the State Hospital. And I spent a lot of time. I was actually president of SCAN at that time, and then I later became the councilor for Ward 2. And I spent a lot of time on this, and all the time I spent was with NESCA. NESCA is always sort of historically had I don't know, the biggest interest in this park, I think, and I think that's still the same situation. And I understand the concerns of NEN, but I think that those concerns will be alleviated as this planning process moves forward.
Okay, anyone else? All right. The recorder, please call a roll.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung. Absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordike.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. All right. Let me get to the next one here. We'll go to these information reports. Everybody had a chance to read them. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple of motions on these. First on item 6C,
Okay.
I move City Council call up 6C, which is file number 22-115 for a public hearing.
Second.
Second by Stapleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is an important decision that needs to be made. I think it's appropriate in the City Council's purview. And I think I don't typically take these up for our purview, but I think in this case it's warranted. So because of some of the questions at issue here that will be, I think we'll have the ability to hear in more detail during the hearing. I think it's appropriate for us to take jurisdiction.
And this is out in your ward, right?
It is in my ward, Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor. It's at the old mushroom plant.
Right. That's a huge.
It's huge.
Jerry, are we going to get, Councilor, just you follow this one real closely. Are we going to get a pretty good picture then of how that huge area is going to redevelop as we go through this?
Yeah, that part of the process is actually done and the roads are being built. This is just on a piece of the commercial space that's in one corner. And so, yeah, I'm sure in relation to this hearing, you will all get a chance to see it. I've had numerous opportunities to see. There's a whole lot of houses going out there.
Yeah.
And then this is just a piece of it that I think will have maybe some commercial and apartments and multifamily, that sort of thing potentially.
Okay, great. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question about 6A, which is the tree report, and I was really happy to receive it and look at it. I do have a question related to the ice storm of a year ago, February.
We're still on 6B, Councilor.
We're on 6C right now to move.
Oh, I thought we voted on that. No, sorry.
No, we haven't yet. No, that's okay.
I'm muting myself.
Okay. Okay, anyone else on 6C? Okay, if the recorder please call a roll.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung is absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordike.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Councilor Hoy, you said you had one other. Why don't we If you have a motion, why don't you go ahead and give us that one?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is regarding item 6F. On behalf of Councilor Leung, I move City Council call up item 6F, which is file 22-128 for a public hearing.
Second.
Second by Stapleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On this one, I do not know the reasons behind Councilor Leung's request. I did offer to pull this up for her on her behalf if she was not able to be here tonight. She's not able to be here, so I'm simply acting on her behalf to call it up for a public hearing.
Huh. Okay. Councilor Anderson, do you know why Councilor Leung did this?
Yeah, no, I don't. But just speaking generally, Mr. Mayor, when these things come up in an individual councilor's ward and that individual councilor wants to pull it up, you know, I'm generally in support of it because that councilor knows more about the ward than the rest of the council does.
Yeah, you kind of count on them letting us know at least if they have any thinking on it. Maybe next time she will. Okay. Okay, any other questions on this one? Okay, if the recorder please call a roll.
Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Councilor Leung is absent. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordijk. Councilor Nordijk.
Aye.
Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Okay, Councilor Anderson, what you got?
Thank you. As I said earlier, before I was corrected that I shouldn't be talking about it, which was right. I think this is an excellent report. My question relates to the ice storm of a year ago, February, and that is the report says the ice storm reduced the tree canopy coverage by 17.8%. That's a pretty big chunk. And so I would like to be told, how are we going to go about replenishing this and taking care of it? I know we have a general policy. We want to increase the tree canopy, but this is a big chunk. 1 out of 5 trees was removed, or 1 out of 5 coverage almost was removed. So what are the plans of the Parks Department and the Public Works Department to do anything here? And I do note that there was some issue otherwise about, we got some insurance money from the ice storm. So is any of that going to be used to help plant some more trees?
Well, who's going to say we're going to solve this by planting more trees? Patricia, is that you?
Yes, good evening. Patricia Farrell, Parks and Natural Resources Planning Manager. Unfortunately, Mylan Davis, our urban forester, wasn't able to attend tonight, so hopefully I can answer the question. But it's a little bit, the 17% is, yes, very alarming. However, what it doesn't take into account is that we also had tree growth during that period. So we did actually gain, there's a little bit more of a nuanced approach to the whole loss and gain. But nevertheless, we did lose a significant chunk of our urban canopy. And on that website, the ArcGIS online site, one of the things that Public Works staff did was to develop this site and to help with locating where trees were removed in order that we can replant. And so it's a very extensive inventory of trees that were damaged, trees that were removed, and that is going to lead to going back and replanting in those areas.
Okay. Councilor Varney.
Thank you. And Councilor Varney, Ward 8. Yeah, again, with the tree report, thank you so much, Patricia. The report was brought up through SCRAB previously, and I just wanted to say tonight what a wonderful report it is, and it's so detailed. And you know, if you look at the appendices, you get into the community forestry strategic plan summary, and it addresses the goals that we reached in the year. There's the canopy impact, the ice storm response, and then to follow up on what Councilor Anderson was asking about the tree survey. That was something that SCRAB initiated 3.5, or the tree subcommittee started, because Because what we wanted to do was, how are we going to increase tree canopy in Salem? And so we started looking at marketing, and then we decided on a survey that went out to the areas that did not have high proportions of tree canopy. And the results of the survey are in this report, and the needs are education about trees. Part of the survey asked about why folks maybe didn't want trees or what would encourage them to plant trees. And as a result of the survey, we had a pilot project that I participated in, went up and planted trees with Friends of Trees at McKay, and then at a couple of private residences. And the folks where we were planting trees on private property, all they had to do was request to get a tree planted, and they were very, very happy. So I just wanted to fill you in.
Excellent. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to follow up on Councilor Varney's comments. I am hoping that that sort of public-private partnership where we're planting trees on private property continues and really actually expands. I know in my area, as with every area of the city, we had a significant number of street trees that were destroyed. And I'm not sure how well our outreach, how effective it was in terms of getting private landowners interested in this. So I'm hoping that, I don't know, we can maybe take another run at it, especially out in Northeast where our canopy is already below the rest of the city. I would hope that we could maybe, I hope that wasn't a one and done out here. I know it was out in NOLA. I hope we can do it some more and maybe work on the outreach to get to folks who we may not have reached the first time. Thank you.
That's absolutely what we plan to do, Councilor Hoy.
Councilor Stapleton.
Thank you so much. Councilor Stapleton, Ward 1. I had a couple of questions here, and I'll kind of piggyback off of Councilor Hoy's comments. And I noticed that in the survey, we really did not have the response from our Latino population. And it states that you guys are going to address that. Can you give me any information on how we're going to reach those community members to get their input on how we can get more tree canopy in Northeast Salem, especially?
Yeah, we've been having discussions about how to improve that next year, and a couple of ideas. We didn't really have time this year, especially with the cleanup.
We're losing you, Patricia.
With our urban forestry crew to maybe do some. Can you hear me? Okay.
And now, yeah.
Okay. I'm unstable. It says. So
yeah.
Patricia, go ahead and turn off your video. That might help.
Want to let Robert go?
Well, I was going to say, go ahead and turn off your video, Patricia. We know you're there. See if that helps your bandwidth.
Okay, I'll talk with that. Does that sound better?
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, all right. So yes, we were kind of short-handed because of the ice storm cleanup, but we will do a more concentrated outreach, possibly going door to door and doing door hangers as we do with street tree to try to get more yard trees planted, and also to do more outreach through groups such as the Salem Leadership Foundation, those meetings that has a lot of good turnout and good outreach potential that way.
Great. Can I have a follow-up real quick, Mayor?
Sure.
All right. Let me see here. I had a whole list of questions, but I'm going to narrow them down because the meeting's getting long. I saw through the whole report that there were several different times that we have amended the code to make this work easier for the urban forester. And my question is, do we have any, or do you see any in the future changes to the code that need to be made in order to make us more easily reach our goal of canopy?
Well, I think a lot of the work that has been recently accomplished by community development for protecting existing older trees is going to go a long way to protecting our canopy, because those are the big trees. Those are the big chunks of our canopy that when we lose one of those, it leaves a big gap that takes decades to fill. So I think passing that code is a huge step. I think some other things might be more related to design standards to allow for some kind of different techniques to work around trees and tree roots. I think that would help as well. So those are things, the things that spring to mind.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the last thing I want to say is that through the whole thing, I just saw a reoccurring theme of more education needed and more outreach. And I just would love to hear at a later date or be involved in whatever way I can to help this process go out into the community more. And thank you for your service, Patricia. I know you're getting short on time with us. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for your work on this. It really does mean a lot.
Okay. Anyone else? Councilor Phillips?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bennett, and thank you, Patricia, for your email earlier today. I got the summary page that kind of broke up the data on the impact of the ice storm event on tree loss by ward, and I know that there were multiple neighborhood associations that were looking for that data. It looks like Ward 3 lost 190 acres worth of tree coverage, which in absolute numbers was the second highest behind Ward 7. But Ward 3 is also the physically largest physically largest ward. So by a percentage, it wasn't quite as much. I mean, that being said, I think that the work that you've done and the city staff have done and other organizations throughout our community is admirable. But I do get the sense that we've lost a significant chunk of coverage. I mean, I think we were over our target of 24% the last time we had an official survey. And it may not be under 20% if you account for the growth that's happened, not just the loss from the ice storm. But when can we expect the next inventory would be question one. And then where are we at in terms of our goal for 28% coverage or tree canopy by 2030? Are we going to miss that mark now, or do we still have a chance to get there with our current inventory and expected growth?
Let me see if I can keep my camera on and you can hear me. Let me know if you can't. So technically we do the whole large inventory every 10 years as required by code. But just last year, or 2 years ago, actually, our Public Works section has been able to do some mapping using a different technology. And that's what we saw, that's what we use for the ice storm analysis. So they could do that every year if there's funding to do that. And that would provide a more rapid snapshot of where we are. And that makes it easier to compare too, because otherwise we're kind of comparing apples to oranges. So that's something we can continue to do as often as we need to kind of watch the growth. It's hard to say if we're going to meet our target because the trees that we have will continue to
We're going to have to turn off your camera.
And we are planting at a higher rate. And so we're hoping that we're not going to fall too short of our goal, even with the loss, given the amount of trees that we're planting and protecting now.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Any other issues on the information reports? Okay, I have 2 people signed up under public comment, unrelated to issues on items on the agenda. Sandra Hernandez.
Hello.
Hi.
Sorry about that. I've been waiting for a while, so I wasn't.
Yeah.
Also, just to start off, I'm speaking from the heart. I didn't really prepare public comment or testimony today. As everybody here already knows, a horrible incident happened this weekend where 5 people have been killed simply for living under conditions that, they have been forced to live in. And also after being removed from the camp by at the park downtown, these folks were put in even more danger after having been relocated. So today, I just want to ask everybody on here to take a few minutes or seconds of silence for the victims of this horrible car accident. And in honor of everybody who was a victim and survivors, I would request to everybody on here to immediately end the sweeps that are happening constantly in Salem. They're completely inhumane. I've witnessed a couple of them, the biggest one being at the Marion Square Park. Nobody should be, you have to live through that. And the way in which our community members were removed, even after having to figure out where to go, getting bulldozers to come in and just pick up all their belongings and their only homes. It was completely inhumane. And I hope that that stops now, and that this city council takes the right steps to end the violence that is happening towards our unsheltered community as you figure out what resources to bring in. Criminalizing our community members is not the answer. Today we heard about the possible community sanitation center. And while you decide this, I hope that you take the time to end the sweeps now and for this entire time. It's entirely inhumane to have to live through that. It's inhumane to have to be in the streets because you can't afford housing, and then to have to deal with policing and being removed from the only place you can sleep in. So I hope that you take this into consideration, and that you take the lives of people who are living in the streets seriously, as their lives matter. They are human beings and they shouldn't be treated like this. So I hope that the sweeps stop now, because if they don't stop, you have plenty of community members who will act. We will be at the doorstep of the city council if this doesn't stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? C. Nayeli.
Hi. I'm here, actually, hello, City Council. Today I'm here hoping to talk more about, again, the tragic accident you've talked about already tonight. I know homelessness is a complicated problem that I'm sure none of you know what to do about, but in the meantime, Marion Square Park should have been left alone. A community-ran campground, which is how it was maintained prior to evictions being allowed, would have saved lives. Everything in the park was accessible: the basketball court, the skate park, the sidewalks, all of it. And you had a large number of elderly and disabled residents living in this park who are risking their lives to reach resources that were once easily accessible to them. I support repealing camping bans until real solutions come. I do not support additional funds being used to police the houseless community, and I support that we stop the sweeps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right, that's all I have left. So City Council is adjourned. Now, what's next?
All right, we have the Housing Authority of the City of Salem. I will call that meeting to order for March 28th, 2022. If the recorder will please call the roll.
Vice Chair Stapleton.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Phillips.
Here.
Commissioner Leung is absent. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Nordijk.
Here.
Commissioner Varney.
Here.
Chair Hoy.
Here. Thank you. And I've got good news. It's only 9:02 and we just have 2 more meetings to go. So hope you're all comfortable. Let's see, we have nobody. I'm sorry, Vice Chair Stapleton, do we have any additions or deletions?
We do not.
Thank you. I see we have nobody signed up for public comment. Vice Chair Stapleton, the consent calendar.
Yes, I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Thank you. All right, the consent calendar consists of item 3.3A, which is the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality site-specific technical consultation cost recovery agreement for the Sequoia Crossing site. Oh, and sorry, 3.1A, the March 14th, 2022 draft Salem Housing Authority minutes. And item 3.3B, which is authorizing Salem Housing Authority to enter into a limited partnership agreement with CDP Gateway Phase 1 LLC, and CDP Oregon LLC. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Vice Chair Stapleton.
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Phillips.
Aye.
Commissioner Leung is absent. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Nordike.
Aye.
Commissioner Varney.
Aye.
Chair Hoy.
Aye, motion passes. We have no public hearings. We have no special orders of business, but we do have some information reports. And I see our housing administrator, Ms. Utes here. Ms. Utes, what would you like to share with us?
Good evening. I'm Nicole Utes. I'm the Housing Administrator for Salem Housing Authority. And first and foremost tonight, the Salem Housing Authority wishes to also extend our condolences to the friends and family of the 4 individuals of our unsheltered community who tragically lost their lives early Sunday morning. Our agency appreciates the collaboration and quick notification to service providers in effort to help the survivors through this tragic event. We have our warmest well wishes to those individuals who are still in the hospital today. It's always difficult for SHA team members to hear of any deaths of the unsheltered members of the community. We extend our compassion to all the first responders who arrived at scene of this devastating and unthinkable event. We will continue to work towards our mission to provide decent, safe, and affordable housing to those who are less fortunate to have a safe place to live. Tonight in the program management report, I also wanted to take note of our housing inspection situation that's occurring and asking anybody in the neighborhood association meetings and community partner events that we're really striving and struggling to get our housing capacity for Section 8 voucher program. The inspection rate for failing housing inspections is very high. So with over 38% of them failing in just a 2-week period of time, that's more extensive than we've had in the past. We do understand that this is an unexpected consequence of many of our partners that are with the apartment complexes and affordable housing projects that were not able to get into units due to COVID safety requirements, but also bringing to light how much those failed inspections and are creating for the housing authority to have to return to these sites multiple times in effort to keep these units decent, safe, and affordable for the residents that we serve every day. So we're hoping that we can gain some help and cooperation in ensuring that people get out there and inspect the units and ensure they are in good capacity for the members that are living in them today. Also, we appreciate the partnership with CDP and wanted to bring to light that that's a new complex that is going to be providing affordable housing in South Salem. I do know that there's been some concern that we do only build housing or housing related in congregated areas of North Salem or other locations, but we do have a plentiful stock of housing throughout the Salem community, including west, south, and all areas of Salem. It is our goal to have almost every ward with housing availability.
Thank you, Ms. Utes. Could you back up a little bit to the failed inspections? So can you kind of just maybe tell us in real terms, what does that mean? When somebody fails an inspection, what does that look like?
Absolutely. So I should back up to the fact that every Section 8 voucher holder is, when they're provided a voucher, it's a HUD requirement that that unit passes what we call a housing quality standards inspection. This means we go out, check outlets, ranges, make sure that hot water heaters are to code and that the unit is in good condition before we make housing authority payments on in these affordable units for the residents that live there. It is our priority to make sure there's no lead-based paint where children are residing in, that they meet good quality standards and they're good housing stock before we're making payments on these units on a monthly basis. It's also that it's a requirement that we re-inspect these on an annual or biannual basis. And right now we're catching up 2 years of COVID waiver requirements that we didn't go into these units as part of the COVID-19 safety protocol for housing and urban development. So now we are tasked with completing all 100% of these inspections by the end of this year, December 31st, 2022. If we were to do every inspection and have it pass this year, we would be about 500 inspections behind. So we're asking drastically for the cooperation of every individual to do pre-inspections, get into their units and make sure that these are to standards, not only for the fact that these individuals rely on these payments, but for the fact that the units should be in housing quality standard condition at all times.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Vice Chair Stapleton.
Thank you. Yeah, I will have to say, when I read your report, I had quite the wave of righteous anger that really boiled up for me personally. And I have been struggling to find my balance, knowing that there is a lot of nuance with this struggle, and that I'm trying to find my own compassion for understanding that there's a lot of different things that are coming into play with this. I own a rental unit, and even through the pandemic, when there was issues that arose, we made sure to get on them and get them fixed. So I struggle with this kind of neglect. Sorry, people racing by my house right now. Okay, so they're gone. So can you give us an example of something that, I don't know, maybe Chris, you asked this already, but can you give us an example of something that would cause a failure of an inspection, or something that maybe an example of something that we've seen? And honestly, I want to know how I can help, and I don't know how I can do that. I don't know what to do with this information. So I need you to tell me what to do, Nicole.
Sure. The biggest thing is just bringing it to light and having everybody understand that this is a huge issue right now, and that landlords will hopefully go out and take a look at their properties, whether they're Section 8 rentals or not. This is very important to know that the conditions of the units had drastically declined from 2 years ago to this period of time during the COVID-19 pandemic. And part of that could have been fear from the tenant not calling in work orders. It could have been for the landlord not wanting to disturb their residents during this period of time. It has just occurred. And I can tell you that our fear is the abatement of rent and where individuals will go. Our rent capacity in Salem is limited, and we would rather get these units repaired and up to housing quality standards, as opposed to have these individuals have to relocate or find a new rental in effort to keep the payments to them. But it is a requirement of the Section 8 program that they meet HQS standards. And I can tell you, recently we've dealt with one that is a sink, that is a leaking sink, and we've gone out on it 3 times, and it's the last item that needs to be fixed. And I will say that they finally replaced the sink and the faucet and everything, and we're good to go. But 3 times out is a lot for our staff, who is a team of 2 for all voucher holders out there. And these are 2 new staff onto our team. So in effort to try to help keep the flow going, we're even looking at bringing in capacity of consultants to try to help get out there and do some of these repeat inspections for us.
Other questions for Ms. Yates? All right, well, I think that concludes our agenda, unless there are any other items, Ms. Yates, that you had. Oh, I see Councilor Nordyke's hand, sorry.
Oh, that's quite all right, Councilor Hoy, I appreciate that. So I just had a question about, let me see, I'm trying to find the resolution. I'm struggling to locate it. I switched screens and now I can't find it. Okay. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the limited partnership agreement and the 184 unit apartment complex. It says in the report that it offers a different type of affordable housing living. And I'm wondering, what does that mean exactly?
So this is actually a new and innovative program, and it's actually, there's some up north that this team has built up there, and it's been very successful. It's unique in a manner of that it's intergenerational, and it in hopes it's bringing our seniors together with our younger generation so that they can build upon each other. And I can tell you this firsthand with having a housing authority office next to a senior tower. I know one of their big examples is computer systems, internet, navigating the new digital and generational world. This will be many computer or community spaces where the seniors maybe are teaching the younger generation to be able to garden and do various things out with their hands and being into the community garden spaces, and as well as community rooms and different functions that have electronical and digital world of the virtual new life for doctor's appointments and everything that comes along with it. Navigating cell phones for some of our seniors can be a challenge on a day-to-day basis, and they bring them into the office and we work with them. So I'm really excited to see that they're intermixing the two communities together and hoping that each of them can learn off of each other. And 184 units of affordable housing is amazing in South Salem for us. So it's something we have absolutely been looking for. And it doesn't always have to be the housing authority being the builder or the developer of it. We love to partner on wonderful projects like this. And this one is a very large one. It will also, we will be assisting. They've been awarded project-based vouchers from our Section 8 department to help with some more subsidy for more deep subsidy into some of these units. But 184 three-bedroom, 1, 2s, and 3 bedrooms is a huge asset to add into the South Salem community. But this is one that we also have Claxter Crossings, Fairhaven Gardens, Fruitland Meadows. These are all partnerships that we have, that we don't do the day-to-day management and function of it, but we're there annually. We check the files, we make sure the property is well maintained, and that they're upholding their partnership deal with the housing authority to keep their tax exemption. So this is a perfect example of expanding our affordable housing portfolio without being the actual developer.
Thank you.
Sounds awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Eaton. Just to kind of amplify on what she had to say is that essentially we partner with the nonprofit or with the private developer and loan them our ability or our status as a governmental entity. So they get some of the benefit, they do the work, and it's a great partnership because we get guaranteed affordable housing in our community. So it's really a win-win. And like Ms. Hughes was saying, we have a number of these around the community. So yeah. Other questions? All right. Well, seeing no other items on our agenda, the Housing Authority is adjourned.
Hey, I'll call to order the Urban Renewal Agency for March 28th. If the recorder, please call a roll.
Board Member Stapleton.
Here.
Board Member Anderson.
Here.
Board Member Phillips.
Here.
Board Member Leung is absent. Board Member Gonzalez.
Here.
Board Member Hoy.
Here.
Board Member Nordijk.
Here.
Board Member Varney.
Here.
Chair Bennett.
Here. Okay, any additions or deletions?
No.
Have no public comment. The consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Second by Phillips.
So we have item 3.1A, the February 28th, 2022 draft urban renewal agency minutes. 3.3A, appointments to North Gateway Redevelopment Advisory Board and West Salem Redevelopment Advisory Board. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Okay, any discussion? Recorder, please call a roll.
Board Member Stapleton.
Aye.
Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Board Member Phillips.
Aye.
Board Member Leung is absent. Board Member Gonzalez.
Aye.
Board Member Hoy.
Aye.
Board Member Nordijk.
Aye.
Board Member Varney.
Aye.
Chair Bennett.
Aye. Okay, the only thing left on the agenda is the information report. Any questions, comments, anything? Okay, I think that's a good signal to we're adjourned. So I think we're adjourned for the evening.
For more videos and for more information, go to capitalcommunitymedia.org and follow us on social media.